Hey hunters! Welcome back to Anime Fanfic Corner, the only place on YouTube dedicated exclusively to Hunter x Hunter audiobooks. Alright, quick warning, I'm about to go on a mini rant here, so feel free to skip forward if you're just here for the story. I promise, I won't hold it against you. But listen, hunters, I just have to get this off my chest. The fanfic you're about to enjoy originally had 106 chapters, each around 8,000 characters, and almost every single one was full of translation mistakes and characters' names in their Chinese versions. And instead of taking the easy route, either skipping it or recording it as is, I literally went chapter by chapter, spending countless hours making it all make sense, just so you can have the absolute best listening experience possible. So at the very least, drop a like for the hard work. Anyway, rant over. Huge shout out to the author, their info's in the description, so make sure to check them out and give them some love for crafting this amazing story. If you're new here and you're as obsessed with HXH as I am, hit that like button, subscribe, and officially become a hunter. And don't forget to check out the community posts. I'll be running polls and questions to help shape what we do next. Also, I did not forget. A shout out to CrazyMonkey0518 for being the first commenter on the channel. Alright, enough talk, let's dive into the story. Peace. Chapter 1. In the Hunter world Saba City, in an inconspicuous little restaurant. A young man in a black and white martial arts uniform rode alone in the elevator heading underground. He had a number plate with 406 on his chest. This number plate was his candidate number for the Hunter exam. Obviously, he had qualified for the exam and was heading to the first test site. The mortality rate for Hunter exams had always been extremely high. Those who weren't strong enough and had relied on luck to get this far were likely to die in the exam. However, Tianming wasn't concerned about the danger. This exam, with its high death toll, wasn't difficult for him. He had once served as a vice admiral in the pirate world and had even been a candidate for admiral. Not to mention taking the Hunter exam, he was confident that he could escape unscathed even if he fought a real hunter. Clearly, Tianming was a time traveler, and this wasn't his first time jumping worlds. The last time he had crossed over, he ended up in the pirate world and joined the Navy. After decades of training and battle, he became a top-level candidate for admiral. However, during a mission in the New World, he unexpectedly encountered Kaido, one of the 4 emperors. No one knew what had gotten into Kaido that day, but he chased Tianming relentlessly. Eventually, Tianming was knocked unconscious by Kaido's mace, and when he woke up, he found himself in this new world. Here, he was an insurance salesman. Though he didn't know the first thing about selling insurance. So he quit his job and retreated deep into the mountains to train. It took him 3 years to reacquire his observation haki and armament haki. But after reaching that point, he hit a bottleneck. No matter how much he trained, he couldn't awaken either haki to its former strength. The physical capabilities of people in this world were far inferior to those in his last one. He'd already pushed this body's potential to the limit, and even then, it was far weaker than before. In his view, the only way to surpass the limits of this world's body was to learn the power of Nen. Only by learning Nen could he hope to reclaim his former peak. But he had no money or connections to find a Nen user directly. Fortunately, the Hunter exam was being held, so he signed up in hopes of learning Nen through it. The elevator finally stopped, and a heavy iron door stood before him. Tianming stepped forward, placed his hands on both sides of the gate, and applied pressure, causing it to slowly creak open. Brush, brush. Dozens of eyes turned toward him at once. What appeared before Tianming was a vast hall filled with hundreds of candidates. Unfazed by their stares, Tianming calmly walked into the hall, scanning everyone present. Most faces were unfamiliar, but a few instantly stood out. Gon, Leorio, and Kurapika stood together, a familiar little group. Killua, the white-haired boy with a skateboard, stood off to the side, also observing the people around him with interest. Tianming couldn't help but feel emotional seeing those familiar characters. He remembered when he first saw them in the anime, they were just kids. But now, Things had changed so much, yet they were all still the same age. The body he'd reincarnated into was only 20 years old, not too far from Gon and Killua's age group. At least he was the same age as Leorio. It seemed that nostalgic feeling he had a moment ago was unnecessary. Just as he was spacing out, a fat man with a flat top and stubbly beard walked up to him. "Hello, my name is Tunpa. Pleased to meet you." Tianming narrowed his eyes at the name. As a time traveler, of course he knew who this guy was. The so-called Rookie Crusher, Tunpa specialized in sabotaging newcomers during the exam. He'd failed the test himself for decades, likely because he enjoyed messing with rookies more than becoming a hunter. To put it bluntly, the guy was a twisted pervert. But Tianming didn't mind. He had encountered worse psychos in the pirate world. The number of pirates he'd killed could probably fill this entire hall. Tunpa, compared to them, was just mildly amusing. "My name is Zhao Tianming. Zhao is the surname, Tianming is the given name. You can just call me Tianming." Tunpa found the name a little strange. It didn't follow naming conventions in the hunter world, but quickly moved past it and enthusiastically began introducing other examinees. "That man is Bajro, a powerful martial artist. That one's Takuto, a skilled wrestler. This guy trained snakes, he's known as Scarpang." Tianming listened carefully. Though his strength was weaker than in his past life, gathering information was always useful. He didn't need to rely purely on brute force anymore. When Tunpa got to Hisoka, he abruptly stopped speaking. At the same time, Hisoka glanced their way, causing Tunpa to quickly look away, visibly shaken. Hisoka, however, only gave Tianming a brief look before turning his gaze elsewhere. Since Tianming had no aura, Hisoka saw nothing of interest. Tunpa leaned in and whispered, "You'd better stay away from that guy. See that body on the ground? Someone just touched Hisoka, and he killed him instantly. He's dangerous, be careful." Tianming nodded. A part of him was curious to test his strength against Hisoka. But he quickly buried that impulse. He was here to learn then, not to get wrapped up with a lunatic who might try to claim him. The thought alone gave him chills. Seeing the moment as ripe, Tunpa pulled a can of soda from his backpack and handed it over. "You must be thirsty after that trip. Here, quench your thirst." Tianming accepted it, amused. With his draining and hockey-hardened body, even if it were actual poison turned to paste, he could handle it, let alone a laxative. He was just about to find an excuse to hand it back when a voice suddenly shouted nearby. "Tunpa! You're giving out expired drinks again? Don't drink that stuff or you'll be stuck on the toilet." Tianming turned to see the voice came from none other than Gon, the protagonist of the hunter world. Leorio and Kurapika stood beside him, looking exasperated. Normally, they wouldn't interfere, but since Gon had already spoken up, they had no choice but to back him up. Tunpa scowled at the interruption, but knowing he was outnumbered, he simply snorted and said to Tianming, "You're lucky, newbie. I hope you're this lucky later." With that, he turned and walked away. Tianming sighed. He hadn't minded Tunpa and had even wanted to chat more, but oh well. He tucked the drink away and looked at Gon and the others. "Thanks for the warning. I'm Zhao Tianming. Just call me Tianming. My name is Go." Before Gon could introduce himself, a bell suddenly rang, drawing everyone's attention. Chapter 2. Everyone turned toward the source of the ringing sound and saw a purple-haired man in a suit with an oddly-styled beard standing there. The man announced to the examinees, "I am Satots, the examiner for the first stage of the Hunter exam. All registered candidates are present. The Hunter exam will now officially begin." Without waiting for a response, he turned and strode directly into the pitch-black tunnel. This left everyone baffled. Though he had declared the start of the exam, he hadn't explained anything about the test itself. Still, the candidates instinctively followed after him. The scene quickly became chaotic, with over 400 people flooding into the tunnel in a scattered group. But as time passed, they noticed something odd. Satots was walking faster and faster, his long legs stretching out unnaturally, almost like he had no knees, covering large distances with each step. At first, the candidates managed to keep up by walking briskly. But eventually, walking wasn't enough. They had to break into a run to maintain pace. By then, everyone understood what the first test was. They just had to keep up with the examiner. If they fell behind, they'd fail. Once everyone was fully running, Gon finally had time to introduce himself. "My name is Gon Freaks. Please take care of me. Kurapika. Leorio." Tianming already knew all their names, of course, but he greeted them anyway and made small talk. Leorio and Gon each explained their reasons for becoming hunters. Leorio wanted the benefits that came with the license, while Gon was determined to become a hunter to find his father. Kurapika, on the other hand, kept his true motives to himself. Since he and Tianming were not yet close, it would have been risky to reveal anything about his vendetta against the Phantom Troop. So he gave a vague excuse and left it at that. Leorio, noticing this, shifted the conversation. "By the way, I still don't know your reason for becoming a hunter, Tianming." "Me? I hit a bottleneck in my training and couldn't break through. So I figured becoming a hunter might help me surpass my limits." As soon as he finished speaking, a skeptical voice called out from behind. "Becoming a hunter improves your strength? What do you mean by that?" Tianming looked back and saw Killua approaching casually on a skateboard. Seeing this, Leorio shouted, "Hey! That's cheating. Why do the rest of us have to run while you can just skateboard?" Killua didn't get a chance to respond, because Kurapika answered first. "The examiner only said we had to keep up. He didn't specify how we had to do it. So technically, it's not against the rules." He then looked at Tianming and said, "But I'm curious about what you just said. How exactly does becoming a hunter improve your strength?" Now everyone was paying attention, eyes on Tianming, waiting for his answer. Tianming scratched his head, a bit embarrassed. He'd said it casually, not expecting anyone to pick up on it. It seemed that after decades in the pirate world, constantly fighting and relying on instinct, his social skills had dulled. Still, there was no harm in giving them a little spoiler. They'd find out sooner or later anyway. He lowered his voice and said, "Do you know why hunters are granted so many privileges?" Everyone shook their heads. Kurapika stroked his chin. "Now that you mention it, it is strange. There aren't that many hunters, and most don't seem to be officials or anything. Why are they so highly regarded? It's because some people possess a special power, one that massively enhances their abilities. Modern weapons like guns are useless against them. So instead of letting these people run wild, the world gives them an identity and a system to regulate them. That's what the Hunter Association does." Killua and Kurapika's expression shifted. Both had some experience with Nen users, Killua especially, having grown up surrounded by them. They already suspected the existence of such a power. Leorio and Gon still looked a bit confused, but they were starting to catch on. Killua kicked up his board and walked up to Tianming. "If you know that much, then you must have this power too, right?" Tianming shook his head and spread his hands. "If I already had it, I wouldn't need to take the exam. Don't worry. Most of the people here don't know anything about it. If you pass, there will be specialist hunters who teach you." Everyone visibly relaxed. But Kurapika narrowed his eyes, catching something in Tianming's wording. "Most people don't know how to use it. But that means some do. Could it be Hisoka?" With that topic settled, they returned their focus to running. Along the way, Leorio ran out of stamina several times and nearly collapsed. If Tianming hadn't seen the anime, he might have thought Leorio would fail here. But each time, Leorio would roar with frustration, then charge forward again like he'd just been injected with adrenaline. It left Tianming stunned. That kind of outburst was often a sign someone was momentarily breaking their physical limits. Even though Leorio had the lowest natural talent of the group, he still found a way to push through. Characters in shonen anime truly defied reason. Eventually, after an indeterminate amount of time, a light appeared at the end of the dark tunnel. Gon and Killua were chatting happily as they ran. Despite having just met, the two already felt like old friends. They passed Satots together and exited the tunnel. The rest of the candidates emerged one by one. Tianming deliberately blended into the crowd, making sure not to draw attention. Satots glanced at his pocket watch. You all did well. I now declare the first phase of the exam complete. Anyone who didn't make it to the finish line is eliminated. Next, follow me closely. We'll be crossing the swamp to reach the second testing site. After a short rest, the candidates were energized again. Spirits were high. They were starting to think this exam might not be that difficult after all. But just then, a battered and bloody man stumbled out from behind a tree up ahead. He pointed at Satots and shouted, "Don't trust him. He's a fake. I'm the real examiner for this test." Chapter 3. Tianming stood among the crowd, quietly enjoying the show. He already knew who the real examiner was. The man accusing Satots of being a fake was the actual imposter. But Tianming had no intention of interfering. He preferred to let others handle it while he simply followed along with the main group. Just then, 6 playing cards shot out from within the crowd, 3 aimed at the imposter, and 3 at Satots. The cards moved with incredible speed. The imposter didn't have time to react before one pierced his chest. Eyes rolling back, he collapsed to the ground, dead. Meanwhile, Satots deftly caught the 3 cards aimed at him with both hands. Then he turned to look at Hisoka, silently waiting for an explanation. "It's not that hard to tell who's real and who's fake," Hisoka said calmly. "The Hunter Association wouldn't send someone weak to be an examiner. If he couldn't handle my attack, then he must have been a fake." Strangely, everyone found this reasoning convincing. Still, they wisely kept their distance. No one wanted to get too close to Hisoka. He was clearly dangerous, best to stay far away. Satots' expression was grim, but he said nothing more. He turned and continued leading the group toward the venue for the second test. Tianming followed with the rest, deep in thought. He remembered seeing this scene on TV when he was younger and had thought Hisoka's action was efficient and direct. But now that he was living it, it felt very different. Hisoka wasn't someone who acted for justice. Quite the opposite, he thrived on chaos. There was no way he exposed the fake out of goodwill. And there was something strange about Satots' reaction, too. He seemed displeased. Almost like he'd arranged the imposter himself. Maybe it was meant as a hidden trial to test the candidate's judgment. If that were true, then Hisoka had completely undermined it. Just as Tianming was lost in thought, the person running in front of him came to an abrupt stop. Caught off guard, Tianming nearly collided with him before slamming on the brakes. What the hell? Why stop all of a sudden? He looked more closely and realized it was Leorio, and beside him stood Kurapika. Both were frozen in place, staring ahead with grave expressions. Tianming tapped Leorio's shoulder. "What's going on?" Leorio silently pointed forward. Tianming followed the gesture, and immediately felt a headache coming on. There, standing in the middle of the path, was Hisoka. Several corpses of examinees lay at his feet. He was clearly not here for a friendly chat. Tianming sighed. He had hoped to avoid trouble by sticking with the group, but it looked like the main force had led him straight into it instead. Hisoka stretched lazily, a grin on his face. "From here on, I'll be your temporary examiner. Those who don't qualify will leave their lives behind." At that moment, more than 20 other examinees, mostly background characters, had also arrived and were blocked along with them. Naturally, they were outraged. "Don't get cocky, Hisoka. Let's all attack at once. You can't take on all of us." "Yeah, you're strong, but there's no way you can win against so many of us." Unfazed by their threats, Hisoka pulled out a playing card, then vanished in a blur as he charged into the crowd. "You!" Before any of them could react, Hisoka's card sliced through the air like beams of white light. Each time he passed through someone, a scream rang out. One by one, they dropped like flies. In mere seconds, more than 20 examinees were killed. When the carnage was over, only Tianming, Leorio, and Kurapika remained. As Hisoka approached, Kurapika gritted his teeth. "I'll go on the offensive. You two support me. If we work together, We might stand a chance. Leorio shook his head. It's no use. He's way too strong. We should split up, run in 3 different directions. That way, even if one of us gets caught, the other 2 might escape. Kurapika hesitated, gripping his hidden nunchaku tightly. Eventually, he gave a reluctant nod. Leorio turned to Tianming, silently asking for his opinion. Tianming already knew what Leorio was thinking. In the original anime, Leorio made the same suggestion, then turned back alone, risking his life to save the others. But this wasn't anime. What if Hisoka didn't show mercy this time? If Leorio died, Tianming would lose someone important in this world. With a quiet sigh, Tianming adjusted his black and white martial arts uniform. You 2 go ahead. I'll catch up later. Leorio and Kurapika were stunned. They thought he was planning to sacrifice himself. Leorio protested, there's no need to do that. If we all run, we all have a chance. Maybe Hisoka will get confused and lose track of us. Kurapika added, even if we fight him, the 3 of us together have a better chance than one alone. We don't abandon comrades. He pulled out the dual swords hidden in his nunchaku. He had hoped to keep them as a surprise, but now there was no choice, he had to be ready to fight. Tianming smiled wryly. Have I been acting too low-key? Do they really see me as just another background character? He met their eyes, his expression firm. Relax. I'm confident in my speed. Even if I can't beat him, I can outrun him. Once I shake him off, I'll catch up. Looking into his eyes, both Leorio and Kurapika sensed something different. With a final glance, they nodded and bolted into the trees in separate directions. Now, only Tianming and Hisoka remained. Hisoka grinned. After all that talk, you've finally decided to stay and die? Tianming said nothing and calmly stepped toward him. Even Hisoka looked surprised. His grin widened, and his body trembled with excitement. He knows how strong I am, yet he's approaching me instead of keeping his distance. Fascinating. With a light tap of his foot, Hisoka dashed forward, a playing card in hand, aiming a slash at Tianming's neck. Seeing that Tianming didn't even flinch, Hisoka frowned slightly. Was he just another fool with courage but no skill? Disappointed, he prepared to end it quickly and move on to find a more interesting target. Chapter 4. The air became thick and sluggish, and time seemed to stand still in Hisoka's eyes. He just stared blankly as his body slowly tilted to the right. It looked like he had been knocked down, but he didn't care about the situation at all. Instead, his mind was focused on something far more critical. At first, he thought Tianming was just another strong-willed rookie with no sign of net training. He had approached the fight with a playful attitude. But he hadn't expected Tianming to be such a rare, exquisite fruit. Since meeting Krilo, this was only the second person to excite him to such a degree. I really want to devour you. I really want to devour you. I really want to eat you right now. His pupils rolled skyward. As his shoulder touched the ground, Hisoka slapped the earth with his right hand and launched himself into the air, then unleashed a vicious attack on Tianming. This time, Hisoka didn't use his playing cards, he fought with fists and feet, raining down blows like a violent storm. Tianming relied on his agility and force redirection techniques to continually deflect Hisoka's ferocious strikes, all while analyzing the opponent's strength during their exchange. It appeared Hisoka wasn't using Nen, otherwise Tianming wouldn't be able to deflect the punches so easily. Without advanced abilities, their physical stats weren't too different. Hisoka's raw physical ability alone had already reached the level of a top-tier fighter in this world. As long as Tianming didn't face extraordinary beings like Netero, he could handle powerful individuals like Hisoka, Krilo, or Morel. Still, this was only in terms of raw physical skills. A battle between Nen users didn't rely solely on physical prowess. Proficient Nen usage could enhance one's physical power drastically. While thinking this through, they had already exchanged hundreds of moves. Both had suffered minor injuries, but they were superficial, nothing worth worrying about. Hisoka suddenly paused and created some distance between them. He looked at Tianming, who had fought him evenly without using any nen, and trembled with excitement. "I didn't think you were hiding your strength. You blended in with the crowd so well. I almost missed out on this delicious fruit." Tianming took a step back in disgust. He was all too aware of Hisoka's twisted nature. He wouldn't have exposed his strength in front of him if it weren't absolutely necessary. "Let's end this here. The second part of the hunter exam is coming up. No need to waste time," Tianming said, trying to de-escalate. But Hisoka wasn't about to back down. With a flip of his hand, he pulled out 3 playing cards and hurled them at Tianming. The cards were deadly, forcing Tianming to dodge instead of catching them. Simultaneously, Hisoka dug his shoe into the muddy ground and kicked, sending a cloud of dirt into the air to obscure Tianming's vision. As the smoke filled the area, Tianming activated his observation haki to try and pinpoint Hisoka's position. But before he could lock on, he suddenly sensed a dozen murderous auras from all directions. Playing cards rained down like blades, stabbing toward him from every angle. Tianming's pupils narrowed. His feet became a blur, stomping the ground dozens of times in rapid succession. His figure vanished, then reappeared outside the smoke cloud, having dodged the attack entirely. The technique he used was shave, one of the Rakushiki, 6 powers, from the Navy. It used high-speed footwork by stomping the ground dozens of times in an instant to propel the user like a cannonball. Rakushiki required a very high level of physical fitness. If the body wasn't strong enough, using it recklessly could cause self-injury. At his current limit, Tianming couldn't use it frequently. If he hadn't been pushed to the edge, he wouldn't have used it at all. He turned back toward the lingering dust cloud. As a breeze cleared the smoke, Hisoka was revealed, standing among a pile of playing cards, staring at Tianming with burning eyes. The first wave of cards had just been a feint. The real killing move had been Hisoka's follow-up assault. But somehow, Tianming had escaped it with a speed even Hisoka hadn't seen clearly. Not even Illumi's Oldic, famous for his assassination skills, had such speed. And Tianming hadn't used any nen, which meant it was purely physical technique. To think he cultivated his body to this level without nen. This fruit is incredible, Hisoka thought, eyes glowing with obsession. At this point, he no longer cared about the hunter exam. A hunter license meant nothing compared to Tianming's delicious potential. A terrifying murderous aura burst from Hisoka. The sky seemed to change, and the air grew heavy with the stench of blood. Tianming's eyes widened. This is nen. The sheer pressure could shatter the willpower of anyone untrained. But Tianming smirked. He had already trained himself to use observation haki to resist conqueror's haki in the past. This aura was nothing by comparison. His current body had nearly reached its limit. Without using armament haki, he could barely hold his own against standard nen users. But against a top-tier opponent like Hisoka, he would have to go all out to win. Taking a deep breath, he began channeling armament haki into his fists. If Hisoka insisted on fighting, then he'd show him just how powerful his haki was compared to nen. Just as their oars peaked and battle seemed imminent again, Hisoka abruptly pulled back all his energy and ceased attacking. Tianming's face showed confusion. What now? He stayed alert. Hisoka was unpredictable, and falling for a bluff could be fatal. Hisoka's expression returned to calm. It seems you haven't learned nen yet. But you understand what it is. Tianming remained silent. Hisoka continued, it would be a shame to kill you now. Master nen as soon as you can. And grow stronger. With that, he turned and walked away, his posture comically exaggerated, back arched, hips swaying. Tianming shuddered at the sight. God, this guy's as twisted as I remember. Childhood idol or not, he's a perverted menace. He only relaxed once Hisoka was completely out of range. Finally dealt with him. But this won't be the last time. Once I learn nen, I'll settle things properly. I refuse to let this psycho hound me for the rest of my life. Chapter 5. There were rustling sounds in the grass, And then Gon emerged awkwardly, holding a fishing rod. "I was worried about you, so I came back to check and saw you fighting with Hisoka. I wanted to help, but Hisoka was too strong. I was afraid I'd just get in the way, so." Tianming sighed. Honestly, it was a good thing Gon didn't jump in. If he'd had to protect someone else while fighting Hisoka, the situation could have been far worse. After explaining why he showed up, Gon clenched his fist and said excitedly, "Tianming, you're amazing. You actually went toe-to-toe with Hisoka." Tianming shook his head and replied, "That wasn't going toe-to-toe. Hisoka wasn't using his full strength. If he had, I wouldn't stand a chance." Gon's expression changed to one of shock. Just now, Hisoka gave off this terrifying aura. Was that the special power you mentioned before? He had genuinely been scared. The fight already seemed exaggerated to him, but the moment Hisoka released that pressure, even his scalp tingled. Being born with heightened senses, Gon instinctively hated that feeling, but at the same time, he was intrigued. If everyone had this power within them, could he learn it too? Tianming could already guess what he was thinking, so he said, "Once you pass the hunter exam, someone will teach you. We'll talk more about this later. Just take me to the second exam site for now." Gon nodded in understanding and led Tianming to a warehouse located on a central plain in the swamp, the venue for the second exam. As soon as they arrived, they saw Hisoka again, but he acted as if nothing had happened. Tianming didn't plan to provoke him either and instead rejoined Leorio, Kurapika, and Killua. Leorio and Kurapika were visibly relieved to see Tianming unharmed, while Killua gave him a complicated look. In fact, Killua had been hiding and watching Tianming's fight with Hisoka the entire time. The power they displayed had far exceeded his expectations. Even he had to admit, his odds of beating either of them weren't good. But what really shook him was the moment Hisoka released his nen. That overwhelming aura made Killua's hair stand on end. He'd only ever felt something like that from his brother Illumi. He had originally wanted to help, but in the end, he'd turned and run. Thinking about it now was deeply embarrassing. After a few casual conversations, they quietly waited for the second exam to begin. Before long, the warehouse doors opened and a man and woman stepped out. The woman looked around 20, with pink hair and a fishnet outfit that flaunted her tall figure. The man was the complete opposite, towering at about 3 meters tall, with a bulky, bloated body and a kind, honest face. The two emerged one after the other, and then the large man stepped forward and said, "We are the examiners for the second phase of the hunter exam. My name is Buara, and I'm a gourmet hunter. The one beside me is Menki, also a gourmet hunter." As soon as they heard that the examiners were food hunters, many candidates showed visible disdain. To them, a gourmet hunter was no different from a chef. And if someone with a hunter license still aspired to be a chef, that ambition was something to be ridiculed. Buara didn't seem to mind the mockery, but Menki's face darkened instantly. Her identity as a gourmet hunter was something she took great pride in. The nerve of these people to look down on her. She was already planning to teach them a lesson. "Buara, you go first. I'll give them my challenge after yours," she said, dragging over a sofa and flopping onto it with her arms crossed, clearly sulking. Buara looked helpless. Menki was throwing a tantrum again. He announced his test, to catch a wild boar and roast the whole thing. As long as he was satisfied with the meal, the candidate would pass. The moment the test was explained, the examinees sprang into action. They had encountered wild boars on the way here. It didn't seem too hard to catch one. Most of the candidates figured this challenge would be easy. All they had to do was catch a boar and roast it. With their abilities, that should be a piece of cake. But they soon learned that the wild boars in this forest were no joke. They were thick-skinned, fast, and extremely aggressive. Many examinees were seriously injured or knocked away just trying to approach them. While everyone struggled to figure out how to deal with the boars, Tianming locked onto a target and vanished from sight, appearing directly in front of a massive boar. This one was bigger than the rest, a boar king, perhaps. But against the monster that was Tianming, it didn't stand a chance. He ended it with a single punch, then swiftly cleaned and dressed it before setting it over a fire. He knew that this test was really about whether you could defeat the boar. Bu-erh didn't actually care about the flavor. Not long after, Tianming presented a roasted boar, crispy on the outside, tender on the inside. Bu-erh's eyes lit up, and he drooled at the sight. He opened his mouth wide and swallowed the boar whole. Watching that, Tianming felt a twinge in his throat. Seriously? You just swallow the whole thing without chewing? Aren't you worried about choking to death? After devouring the boar, Bu-erh gave Tianming a big thumbs up. You pass. That boar was delicious. Tianming smiled awkwardly. It had just been simply fire-roasted with no seasoning or cooking technique. Back in the pirate world, it would have been considered trash food. But this guy looked like he'd just eaten the meal of his life. One by one, more examinees brought their boars to Bu-erh. Most were just like Tianming's, or worse. Some were even half-cooked. But Bu-erh happily ate every single one and passed them all. Before long, dozens of candidates had passed. Everyone was in awe of Bu-erh. His appetite was insane. As expected from a gourmet hunter, his appetite was no longer just gluttonous, it was something otherworldly. Tianming had a theory. It probably had something to do with Bu-erh's Nen ability. Maybe it came with vows and restrictions. It was possible that accepting every dish, no matter how bad, and eating it whole was part of that contract. When I awaken my own Nen ability, what type will it be? Chapter 6. It's delicious, I'm full. Thanks for the meal. Bu-erh sat contentedly on the ground, patting his belly, which now looked like a giant ball. There were 70 roasted whole pigs, with bones and scraps piled into a small mountain. His appetite left all the candidates who passed the test utterly stunned. Tianming felt a little hungry just watching the guy eat. If he'd known, he would have saved a piece of meat for himself while roasting his wild boar. With an appetite like that, this fat guy surely wouldn't have missed a single slice. He glanced at the group of candidates who had passed the test, 70 in total. Most were unharmed, with only a few suffering minor injuries. They were mostly familiar faces, side characters who had appeared in the original story. But it had been so long that Tianming couldn't remember their names. Bu-erh's test was over. Now it was time for the beautiful gourmet hunter, Menki, to present her challenge. She lounged on the sofa, legs crossed, and lazily said, "I want to eat sushi. Anyone who can make sushi that satisfies me passes." The entire crowd fell silent in confusion. Gon turned to Killua. "Do you know what sushi is?" Killua shook his head. Even though he was born into the Zoldyck family, he rarely had chances to go out and had never heard of a dish called sushi. Kurapika had come across vague references in books. He knew it involved rice and fish, but had no idea how to make it. Bald-headed Ninja Hanzo, however, was secretly thrilled. Sushi was a specialty from his homeland, he had grown up eating it and knew exactly how to prepare it. This was an easy win for him. But he couldn't let anyone else find out. He needed to quietly catch a fish and make the sushi without drawing attention. Just as he was thinking about how to sneak off unnoticed, he saw Tianming walking straight toward the river in broad daylight. His actions instantly drew everyone's attention. Gon and the others quickly followed. "Tianming, do you know how to make sushi?" Leorio asked. Tianming shook his head. "I've heard of it, but I've never made it before. This'll be my first time trying." He of course knew what sushi was. Simply put, it was fish or other toppings placed over rice, eaten with chopsticks, and often dipped in soy sauce or wasabi. Personally, he disliked eating things like raw fish. In his mind, food should be cooked properly. A medium-rare steak might as well be raw. The correct way to cook steak, in his opinion, was to throw it in a pot and boil it. Gon and the others let out a sigh of relief. Even having just heard of sushi was better than nothing. If they followed Tianming, maybe they could figure it out. Everyone taking the exam was sharp. Seeing Tianming and his group head to the river to catch fish, The rest followed suit. First things first, they needed fish. Tianming, reaching the river ahead of the others, spotted a large fish right away. With a quick motion, before anyone could react, he snatched it up in his arms. The fish was over a meter long, its scales shimmering silver in the sunlight. He picked a spot nearby and built a rack out of branches. Using the small knife provided during the exam, he sliced off a piece of fish meat and set it aside. Gon and the others, who had each caught their own fish, were puzzled by what they saw. Tianming looked like he was preparing to grill the fish. Wait, was sushi just another name for grilled fish? And why had he cut off just one piece of meat? If you're grilling, you usually cook the whole fish, right? Maybe sushi was some special grilling style? Though they didn't understand it, they still followed his lead, setting up racks, making fires, and cutting out slices of fish just like Tianming had done. But Tianming wasn't making sushi yet, he was just hungry. Watching Buara eat a roasted whole pig had made him crave food more than any gourmet show he'd ever seen. His stomach was growling non-stop. Sure, the exam was important. But eating came first. Besides, this part of the test was just a challenge Mankey had cooked up to be picky. Unless you were a professional chef or gourmet hunter, nothing you made would satisfy her. So instead of trying to impress her, he figured he might as well treat himself. Mankey, watching from a distance, was fuming. She saw Tianming grilling fish and instantly realized he knew how to make sushi. Yet instead of presenting it for the test, he chose to sit there and roast fish for himself. This guy has no respect for the examiner. Meanwhile, the other candidates had all started grilling fish. Their eyes were glued to Tianming. Whatever he did, they copied. Everyone was basically playing follow the leader. When Tianming flipped the fish, so did they. When he sprinkled salt and pepper, they did the same. And when he picked up the grilled fish and started eating. Wait, what? He just ate it? Was this part of making sushi? Gon hadn't realized something was wrong yet. Just as he was about to take a bite of his fish, Killua stopped him. Gon, snap out of it. He's not making sushi, we've been tricked. Gon scratched his head in confusion. Kurapika went straight to the point. Tianming, weren't you making sushi? Why are you eating the ingredients yourself? Tianming wiped his mouth and blinked. What's wrong with eating my own grilled fish? Besides, my sushi's already made, I just haven't delivered it to the examiner yet. Kurapika frowned in confusion. Then he remembered something, he glanced at the piece of fish Tianming had sliced earlier. That slice was now placed over a small ball of rice. He recalled Tianming shaping it with his hands. Kurapika's face twitched as he pointed at it. That's sushi? Just a piece of fish on rice? You call that a dish? At that moment, Hanzo strolled over holding his own perfectly crafted sushi. He patted Kurapika on the shoulder and said, Tianming's right. That's exactly what sushi is. Upon hearing that sushi was from Hanzo's hometown, everyone suddenly wanted to toss Hanzo and Tianming onto the grill themselves. Chapter 7. As Tianming expected, Mankey gave him a failing grade after tasting his sushi. Not just him, every candidate who followed, including Hanzo, who grew up eating sushi, was also judged to have failed. As time passed, a heavy feeling grew in everyone's chest, until Mankey let out a satisfied burp and smiled at the group. I'm full. Thank you for the hospitality. Everyone stared blankly. Thank you for the hospitality? What's that supposed to mean? Seeing the confusion on their faces, Mankey sighed with regret. Even though everyone worked hard, none of the sushi you made satisfied me. Therefore, all candidates who took this test have failed. The scene fell into an eerie silence, and then erupted like a powder keg. What kind of joke is this? We risked our lives to take the hunter exam, and now we're being eliminated because of this? We didn't come here to enter a gourmet competition. Why are we being disqualified just because we can't cook? You're just a cook. How can a chef be a hunter? You have no right to judge us. Buar stepped forward, ready to intervene. Menki also reached for her dual swords in a blind spot where the candidates couldn't see. The atmosphere grew tense. Just as a full-blown brawl seemed inevitable, a massive airship approached from the sky, drawing everyone's attention. Looking up, they saw a small black dot falling from the airship as it passed overhead. Whoosh! An old man with a white beard and a long robe landed gracefully. Tianming's eyes sharpened when he saw the man's skill. To jump from that height and land without causing even a single crack in the ground, his physical mastery was extraordinary. This man was Isaac Netero, the chairman of the Hunter Association. After learning that Menki had been unfairly eliminating candidates, he'd come in person. Menki, who had been exuding arrogance just moments earlier, immediately softened upon seeing Netero. She didn't make excuses after being criticized and admitted her mistakes without protest. Still, even with her apology, the test needed to continue. Netero suggested Menki revise the test into something more universally acceptable, and demonstrated herself first to prove it could be done. After a moment of thought, she proposed a new test: boil a delicious egg. Netero agreed and took the examinees aboard his airship to the site of the next challenge. After disembarking, Tianming walked to the edge of a cliff and looked down. Below was pitch black. He used observation hockey to scan the area and quickly located the objective of the mission. Meanwhile, Menki began explaining the rules. This is the nest of the grape spiders on Mount Split Toad. If you jump down, you can collect their eggs. Boil one and make it delicious to pass the test. Some candidates visibly hesitated, clearly unsettled by the idea. But their hesitation was met with eye rolls and scornful looks from the others. Truthfully, this kind of challenge was already extremely lenient. If someone wasn't willing to go this far, they might as well head to a wishing well and hope a hunter license falls from the sky. Menki jumped first, grabbing onto the silk of the grape spider's mid-fall. She snatched an egg and effortlessly climbed back up to show it off. Then Gon jumped. His thick skin made him fearless. Killua, Leorio, Kurapika, Hisoka, and the others soon followed. Tianming also leapt with the group. A few seconds later, his feet landed precisely on one of the grape spider's silk threads. These spiders spun their silk between the canyon walls, and their eggs were suspended in the middle. Tianming had already locked onto a clutch of spider eggs with his observation hockey. He crouched and carefully collected them. Just as he was preparing to climb back up the cliff, the spider silk beneath him suddenly trembled. Another person had landed on his line. The newcomer was a muscular man with a ponytail. Tianming recognized him as Takuto, a wrestler who had caused a commotion earlier over Menki's sushi challenge. The guy had a short fuse and a bad attitude. Takuto was clearly irritated. He saw that the nest he'd landed on had already been harvested. All the risk of jumping down, for nothing. Then his eyes locked onto the string of spider eggs in Tianming's hand. A twisted grin crossed his face. He pulled out a half-meter-long dagger and pointed it at Tianming. "Hand over those eggs, or don't blame me for what happens next." Tianming burst into laughter. This guy must be joking. Here he was, standing firmly on the spider silk, while Takuto was sprawled out like a slug, too afraid to stand up. And he was making threats? Tianming thought, you can't even crawl across the silk. You really think you can take them from me? To be fair, Tianming wasn't heartless. He had multiple spider eggs and wouldn't have minded sharing, if Takuto had just asked. But this guy dared to pull a knife on him. Even Hisoka wouldn't get away with that. Realizing how ridiculous he looked, Takuto slowly pushed himself up to a sitting position on the silk. But he still pointed the knife at Tianming and barked, "We're on the same spider thread. You'll have to climb back up eventually, and the only side that leads to the examiners is behind me. You can't pass unless you cooperate. Give me half the eggs, and we both pass." Tianming remained unfazed. Frustrated, Takuto pressed the dagger closer to the spider silk. "I'll give you 3 seconds. If I don't get the eggs, I'll cut the thread. Even if you survive, you won't make it back to the examiners. We'll both fail." He sneered smugly. He had no intention of sharing. After grabbing the eggs, he planned to climb up and slice the silk, leaving Tianming to fall and fail. "Laugh at me, will you? You bastard. Go to hell." At that moment, Tianming, who had been silent the whole time, finally spoke. But instead of agreeing or mocking him, he calmly uttered just two mysterious words. Chapter 8. Tianming raised his leg and kicked. An azure blue slash shot out instantly toward Takuto. The Rankyaku, Tempest Kick, pierced straight through Takuto's chest. He watched in horror as both his arms were severed. Then, slowly, his upper body slid off, and everything went black. Silence. The surrounding candidates stared in disbelief. All they saw was Tianming raise a leg, followed by a flash of blue light, and just like that, professional wrestler Takuto was split in two. Did he have some sort of hidden weapon inside his pant leg? Ignoring their stunned expressions, Tianming leapt into the air. Tapping the air lightly with his toes, he stepped upward and rose back to the top of the cliff. Every examinee still climbing below widened their eyes in shock. The ones already at the top, including Chairman Netero, were equally stunned. In the world of hunters, Nen users can have all kinds of strange powers, including the ability to fly, so flight itself wasn't unheard of. But what shocked them was that Tianming hadn't used any Nen. No aura, no enhancement, no conjured platform, he had literally jumped up, step by step, as if the air were solid beneath his feet. Menki, Buara, and Satots all turned to look at Chairman Netero in confusion. Netero simply shook his head, he had never seen such a technique before. But now, Tianming had caught his interest. When Netero had first arrived, his focus had been elsewhere. The Zoldyck Air Killua, gone, the Sons of Jing freaks, and even the dangerous Hisoka. Compared to them, Tianming had seemed quiet and average. But now, it was clear, this kid was the hidden dark horse of the entire exam. Stroking his beard, Netero walked over to him. "What an extraordinary technique. You can walk on air? I've lived for over 100 years, and I've never seen anything like it. Did you invent this taijutsu yourself?" Tianming realized the chairman was addressing him, so he respectfully replied, "No, it's not something I created. And it's not flight. It's a movement technique, basically stepping on the air." While they chatted, the other examinees finally finished climbing up the cliff. The group began working together to prepare a massive pot. Water was poured in, fires lit, and spider eggs collected earlier were boiled. Each examinee had one egg, except Tianming, who had picked more than 10 in a single sweep. He had to admit, the grape spider eggs were delicious. The flavor was rich but not greasy, and the yolk was smooth and light. After Leorio and the others finished theirs, they were still unsatisfied, so Tianming shared his extras so everyone could enjoy. Honestly, compared to the exotic foods of the pirate world, these eggs were just decent to him. He had once tasted every delicacy across the Grand Line and the Four Seas. These were nice, but nothing legendary. Once everyone had eaten their fill, the second round of the hunter exam officially ended. Candidates who lacked courage or self-awareness had been eliminated. Those who passed were invited aboard Netero's airship. The third exam site was located far away. Usually, examinees had to make their own way there, but this time, Netero was feeling generous and flew them there himself. From the outside, the airship didn't look too big. But once inside, it was clear this wasn't any ordinary aircraft, it was a flying luxury villa. Fully furnished with high-end amenities, kitchens, guest rooms, gyms, movie theaters, and even an entertainment hall. Tianming couldn't help but admire how technologically advanced the hunter world was. Even the pirate world, with all its gadgets and devil fruits, didn't feel quite as modern. No sooner had they boarded than Gon began pestering him non-stop to teach him the moonwalk. Geppo, Killua, Leorio, and Kurapika all chimed in, eager to learn the air-stepping technique. Tianming had no choice but to turn Gon down. Not because he didn't want to teach them, but because most people in this world simply didn't have the physical capacity for the Rakushiki, 6 powers. His own body had been pushed to the limit through decades of training, and even he couldn't use the 6 powers recklessly without straining himself. Killua might be able to handle it with restraint. But Leorio and Kurapika? If they got excited, they'd overuse it immediately. Especially Kurapika. That guy went full kamikaze whenever the Phantom Troop was involved. In the manga, he even used self-destructive nen abilities that shortened his lifespan. Give Kurapika access to Rakushiki? He'd be doing moonwalk with one foot and tempest kicks with the other, trying to take on the whole troop solo. And as for Gon, Tianming had nothing to say. He suddenly understood why Jing didn't want to see his son. If he had a kid like Gon, he wouldn't want him leaving Whale Island either. With that personality, Gon didn't need the 6 powers, he was dangerous enough already just being himself. Compared to these lunatics, Hisoka might actually be the most normal one here. Night fell quickly. After a long day, most of the candidates went off to their rooms to sleep. Tianming, however, couldn't rest. He wandered the airship aimlessly until a familiar scene caught his attention through a tall corridor window. Outside, on a large court beneath the stars, Gon and Killua were playing a volleyball-like game with Netero. Netero was standing on one leg, balancing with his right foot, left foot raised, and his right hand behind his back, holding the ball with his left hand. Gon was charging him, full force, aiming straight for the ball in his hand. The moment felt familiar. Then Tianming remembered, this was that scene. The one where Gon had to grab the ball from Chairman Netero to earn his hunter license early. Curious now, Tianming decided to play along. He approached Killua casually and asked what was going on. After Killua explained the game, Tianming stepped forward and called out, "Can I join this game?" Gon was slumped on the floor, panting heavily from exhaustion. Netero remained perfectly balanced on one leg and chuckled. "Of course. The more players, the more fun. But if it's you, I won't go easy. I won't be limiting myself to one foot and one hand." Tianming grinned and nodded. He'd been waiting for this. Time to use this game. To measure the gap between himself and Netero. Chapter 9. Ah! Chairman Netero's been using only one hand and one foot this whole time? Gon shouted in shock. Killua smacked his forehead with a helpless expression. He'd noticed long ago that Netero was holding back. From the start, his goal wasn't to snatch the ball, it was to make Netero use his other hand or foot. In Killua's view, even forcing Netero to use his full body would be a major win. Thinking about that, he glanced over at Tianming. Even Netero had acknowledged Tianming's strength by saying he wouldn't handicap himself in this match. That alone said a lot. It was just a game, of course, not a real fight. If it were, Killua figured Tianming might even land a hit or two with his trump cards. Tianming and Netero stood across from each other. Netero's secretary, Beans, served as referee. After confirming both were ready, Beans raised his right hand high and then swung it down. "Match, begin." As Beans' voice echoed across the court, Netero calmly continued bouncing the ball in his left hand, completely relaxed. He didn't seem to take Tianming seriously at all. In his eyes, Tianming was just a regular person who hadn't awakened Nen. The fact that he was using both hands and feet was already a sign of respect. After all, this was just a game, no need to go all out. Tianming wasn't offended. He approached Netero steadily and calmly. Against a master like this, losing your cool would only lead to defeat. The two closed the distance. When they were less than 2 meters apart, Tianming struck. In a flash, he appeared right in front of Netero, stretching his right hand to snatch the ball. Netero's pupils contracted sharply. With swift reflexes, he twisted his wrist and used the back of his hand to block the grab. Then he flicked the ball under his armpit and caught it behind his back with his right hand. Tianming wasn't discouraged by the failed attempt. He dove in again. The two figures blurred into streaks of motion, flickering rapidly across the court. Their speed was so extreme, most couldn't even follow with the naked eye. Beans and the Hunter Association staff watching were all stunned. They'd never seen such a high-speed, high-intensity match before, let alone someone able to keep up with Chairman Netero. Even among pro hunters, few could push Netero this hard. This young man, Tianming, was on another level. Gon and Killua watched wide-eyed. They had seen Tianming battle Hisako before, but even so, the pace of this match was beyond anything they had imagined. Seeing Gon clench his fists in awe, Killua couldn't help but tease him. "Hey, Gon. You don't look surprised at all. Did you already know Tianming was this strong?" Gon averted his gaze sheepishly. He had seen Tianming's fight with Hisako and hadn't told anyone. Now that Killua had called him out, he felt a little guilty, especially since Killua was his best friend. "I'm sorry, Killua. Tianming asked me not to tell anyone, and I promised him." Killua didn't let up. He stared at Gon with mock betrayal in his eyes. Gon scratched his head, sweating with embarrassment. All right, I'll make it up to you. I'll buy you ice cream after the exam, okay?" Killua grinned and nodded. "Deal." Back on the court, an hour had passed. Even Netero, the legendary chairman of the Hunter Association, was shocked. He wasn't just the most powerful nen user among humans, he was also a martial artist who had trained his body for over a century. His physical strength had been honed nearly to perfection. Sure, he wasn't as strong as he once was. Age had taken a toll. But still, almost no one could match him in pure physical combat. If Tianming were using Nen, Netero could understand it. Nen users could use enhancement types to increase speed and power. But this wasn't Nen, this was raw physical ability. And physical strength like this took years, decades, of effort to develop. How had this young man reached such a level? As Netero marveled, Tianming was analyzing him as well. Netero was absurdly powerful. If they were fighting seriously, Tianming wouldn't stand a chance. With Nen, Netero could overpower even Haki. And that was without using his ultimate ability, Hyakushiki Cannon, 100 type Guanyin Bodhisattva. If he brought that out, Tianming would likely be crushed. But that said, Netero's strength wasn't beyond what Tianming had anticipated. From his perspective, Netero's power was comparable to a Marine Admiral candidate or a top officer under a Yonko in the pirate world. If this were a fight to the death, Netero might actually fall short, because in the pirate world, endurance was on another level. In the hunter world, even the strongest like the Chimera Ant King couldn't maintain top combat output for more than a day. But in the pirate world, it was normal for elite fighters to battle for days and nights without rest. The sheer stamina difference was insane. Of course, the hunter world didn't emphasize endurance. Battles here leaned more on strategy, traps, and Nen techniques, high IQ fights rather than attrition-based brawls. Having gauged Netero's general level, Tianming decided he was done playing nice. He wasn't stronger than Netero yet, but he had a cheat. Before the match, they hadn't specified any rules about Haki. And Netero had assumed Tianming didn't use Nen, so he wasn't particularly on guard. That worked to Tianming's advantage. He didn't have Nen, but he did have Haki. And Haki was invisible to non-users. Unless someone had trained in it, they couldn't see or sense it, just like how Hiden Nen conceals aura. Quietly, Tianming began coating his arms and legs with armament Haki. Then, he spotted an opening. With a burst of power, he exploded forward. The tiles beneath his feet cracked like spiderwebs. His speed and force skyrocketed. Even Netero was caught off guard. He had been wary of Tianming possibly using Nen, thinking he might be hiding his abilities. But this sudden power boost, without any Nen aura at all, completely threw him off. Even with years of mastery over advanced aura techniques, he couldn't feel a thing. That made no sense. Even if someone used an aura hide to cloak their aura, some trace always remained, a flicker, a ripple in the flow of Nen. But this was nothing. What in the world was this mysterious energy? Chapter 10. Tianming's sudden burst of speed caught even Chairman Netero off guard. For the briefest moment, His reaction lagged, and Tianming's hand clutched the ball solidly. Sensing the ball about to be snatched from his grip, Netero gritted his teeth. He wasn't someone who couldn't lose, he just refused to lose. Even if it was just a game, being bested head-on like this felt worse than death. He could accept being defeated by someone using Nen or a clever ability. But to lose purely in physical strength, especially to a younger man who hadn't even awakened Nen? That hit a nerve. In that moment, Netero activated his Nen. His palm surged with aura as he tightened his grip on the ball. Feeling Netero's aura wrap around the ball, Tianming cursed inwardly. You shameless old man. Pulling out Nen just because you're losing? This is supposed to be a game. But now both of them were locked onto the ball, neither was backing down. They both exerted their strength. Crack. The ball exploded between their hands. The sound echoed like a bomb, shattering nearly every glass panel on the airship. The thunderous blast jolted awake every sleeping examinee, and it took some time for the Hunter Association staff to calm them down. While everyone else settled back down, Tianming was fuming. He held his half of the ball and glared at Netero with the dead fish eyes of a man betrayed. Netero, ever shameless, dusted off his hands and gave a theatrical shrug. Oh dear. Seems you didn't manage to get the whole ball. So I guess that's a loss? Tianming growled through gritted teeth. You crafty old geezer. Even if I didn't get the whole ball, I still got half. What are you going to do, give me half a victory? Well, Netero replied with a grin, you could say you half won. Tianming narrowed his eyes. Then where's my half of a hunter license? Netero waved his hand, laughing. That's the thing, you can't split a hunter license. It only works if it's complete. Sorry, no half licenses allowed. Then, as if something had just occurred to him, he brightened and clapped his fist into his palm. Oh. That's right, you're here to learn Nen, aren't you? I'll make you a deal. Whether you pass the exam or not, I'll teach you Nen personally. Sound fair? Tianming's eyes lit up. Netero was one of the strongest Nen users in the world. Being taught directly by him would be a golden opportunity. But something didn't sit right. Tianming stroked his chin, suspicious. This old man never does anything for free. Why would he be so generous all of a sudden? Then it clicked. He narrowed his eyes. I've done some research. There's an unspoken rule among hunters, if someone teaches you Nen, they're considered your master. You sly old man, are you trying to make yourself my teacher? Netero burst out laughing. That had been his intention, but being called out didn't faze him in the slightest. Nearby, Beans turned red with frustration. You're so disrespectful. Do you know how many people would kill for a chance to be Chairman Netero's disciple? The last time he took on a student was decades ago. Every one of them is now a top hunter. Netero waved him off. Don't get so worked up, Beans. He's not wrong. This so-called rule is unwritten. If you believe it, it's real. If not, it's just superstition. Besides, I said teaching him Nen is his reward for the match. No master-disciple bond required. Tianming nodded, satisfied. He had trained for decades in the Navy completely on his own. Both Aokiji and Garp had offered to mentor him, and he'd refused them too. He just couldn't stand the feeling of being under someone else's thumb. Even back in his previous life, he had a long history of job hopping. He clashed with every direct supervisor he had. One time, he even punched a boss who yelled in his face. That incident got him blacklisted in his hometown, and he was forced to move to another city to keep working. But that was just who he was. He had always been defiant against authority. Even after moving cities, nothing changed. Anytime someone tried to boss him around, he'd get mentally repulsed. When he joined the Navy, he acted alone whenever possible. He'd accept missions when given, but otherwise, he'd stay on his ship, low profile and self-reliant. He avoided higher-ups like Sengoku and Akainu as much as possible, afraid that too much contact would end with them punching him. Now that the terms were settled, Tianming was content. He turned to return to his room for some rest. Killua had lost the mood to keep playing after all that, and Gon, though still eager, had no choice but to stop. The ball was literally gone, after all. And so, the game ended just as abruptly as it had begun. On their way back, Killua glanced sideways at Tianming and asked casually, "That ability Netero used just now. That was Nen, right?" Tianming nodded and began explaining. Nen is the ability to control and manipulate your life energy. What Netero used earlier was just raw Nen, aura, not a special ability. Killua nodded thoughtfully. "You seem to know a lot about Nen. Could you explain more?" Seeing both Killua and Gon were curious, Tianming gave a brief overview. Humans constantly emit life energy. By gathering and containing it around your body, you strengthen yourself and slow down aging. That technique is called Ten, and it's the foundation of Nen. There are two ways to awaken Nen, he continued. One is through dedicated training, cultivating your body until you naturally awaken the energy. The other is to have someone forcibly inject Nen into your body and wrap it around you before the energy disperses. That forceful method is how most people awaken Nen these days. Gon nodded, half understanding. Complicated explanations weren't his strong suit, but his instincts grasped the gist of it. Killua, on the other hand, picked up on something key. "So, you're saying it's possible to awaken Nen through self-training?" "Exactly," Tianming said. "Gon is close, but not quite there yet. You, however, your current condition is very close. If you go back and meditate for a while, you might awaken your Nen right away." Chapter 11. It was a good question. Not only did Gon and Killua want to know the answer, Tianming himself wanted to know as well. As he had just explained, Killua was only one step away from awakening Nen on his own. His hard stats, like physical fitness, had already reached the standard. The only thing he lacked was the soft part, the conceptual understanding and intuitive grasp of Nen. And yet, despite Tianming's strength, strong enough to beat 10 Killuas at once, he still couldn't feel even a trace of Nen within his body. He had tried everything: meditation, breath training, martial arts routines. He even once stuck his hand into an electrical outlet to see if that would spark something. Still, no Nen. He had a theory. The haki he'd cultivated from his previous world might be suppressing the life energy in his body that should become Nen in this one. After all, haki was a product of another world's laws, while Nen was this world's native energy system. It wasn't unreasonable to assume that practicing haki had blocked or overridden the pathways that would normally awaken Nen. If that were true, then he was trapped in a vicious cycle. His haki had already reached its limit, and couldn't be pushed further without improving his physical potential. Improving his physical potential would require learning Nen and refining his aura. But his ability to awaken Nen was being suppressed by the haki already flowing through him. If this continued, he'd never break through. He might as well dig a hole, crawl into it, and hope that the next world he reincarnated into had compatible energy systems. Still, he wasn't giving up. After the hunger exam ended, he planned to explain his situation to Chairman Netero. If anyone could help him figure it out, it would be him. Gon and Killua looked at him with sympathetic eyes. What a shame, someone with so much talent and training, unable to use Nen simply because of incompatibility with this world's energy. The night passed quickly. At dawn, the airship descended and hovered over a massive cylindrical tower. The platform on top was enormous, so much so that even a large airship like theirs looked tiny when docked. The candidates disembarked one by one, waiting for an examiner to arrive and explain the next test. But to their surprise, the airship simply took off and disappeared into the clouds. Everyone looked around in confusion. No instructions, no examiners, no briefing. Just dumped here. What the hell? But these were hunter candidates. They weren't the strongest people in the world, but they were among the boldest. One clever candidate walked to the edge of the tower and began climbing down the exterior wall. Many others had already guessed the test's purpose. Clearly, they had to descend from the top to the bottom. But the others weren't in a hurry to follow. They waited to see what would happen to the smart one. And sure enough, just as he descended less than 10 meters, a group of monstrous birds swooped in from the distant forest. These strange birds had wingspans over 10 meters wide. With terrifying force, they grabbed the climber midair. He screamed and flailed, trying to escape, but it was no use. Within seconds, the birds tore him apart, each one carrying a bloody piece back to the trees. Everyone's scalp tingled at the gruesome scene. Clearly, climbing down the side was not the intended method for this test. Tianming knew he could fight his way through the birds. They looked menacing, but their strength was nothing compared to his. Even if their numbers tripled, he was confident he could reach the bottom. But there was no need to overdo it. Netero had already promised to teach him Nen whether he passed or not. So he might as well proceed through the exam the standard way. Leisurely, he strolled across the platform, scanning the area below him with observation hockey. This tower wasn't just a building, it was actually a massive prison, filled with traps and shifting mechanisms. That's why it was called the Trap Tower. There were multiple hidden entrances on the platform, each designed to activate when someone stepped on them. Once triggered, the person would drop into the tower, and the entrance would reset, remaining hidden. Eventually, Tianming found one of the hidden trapdoors. He scanned it with hockey and confirmed no one else was nearby. He remembered this part from the original story. Teams of 5 were needed to proceed through the tower. He, Gon, Killua, Leorio, and Kurapika made a perfect 5-man squad. Still, he didn't bother calling them. To be honest, he didn't like teaming up with those guys for this part. They were too rule-following. The Trap Tower's design encouraged slow, methodical progression based on majority voting. If he stuck with them, he'd be bogged down by every little choice. He could clear this level faster on his own. So he stepped onto the trapdoor. Instantly, the ground vanished beneath him, and he dropped down into the tower. With a light tap of his toes, he landed safely inside. The lights flickered on, revealing a roughly 20-square-meter room. No windows. Bare walls. A large iron door, tightly sealed, with no handle or visible lock. On one side was a stone pedestal holding 5 bracelets, and above it was a monitor screen. Tianming approached the screen and read the instructions. The rules were simple. This room was meant for 5 people. Once 5 had gathered, they'd each wear a bracelet. From then on, all decisions, opening doors, advancing through hallways, would be decided by majority vote. Once a vote was made, the corresponding path would open. No exceptions. Satisfied that this matched what he remembered from the story, Tianming leaned against a wall with his arms crossed. He would wait. Once the others arrived, he'd immediately knock them out, steal their bracelets, and continue the exam solo. With his strength, he wasn't worried about any of the tower's traps. It would actually be faster and safer if he handled everything alone. In fact, this was doing his trash teammates a favor. The next stage of the exam was much more dangerous. Letting them be eliminated now would probably save their lives. As he smugly congratulated himself on his compassion, the mechanism above triggered again. Someone was falling through. Tianming turned his head, curious. Who will be my first trash teammate? Chapter 12. Wearing a white sleeveless top and with playing card symbols painted on his face, Hisaka landed gracefully on the ground. The moment he saw there was someone else in the room, he looked up, and his eyes met Tianming's. His blank expression immediately shifted into one of gleeful surprise. "Oh my, so you're here too. I must have wandered into the right place." Tianming was momentarily taken aback, but quickly composed himself. Of all people, my first teammate had to be Hisaka? Still, as long as he didn't interfere with his speedrun strategy, it was fine. Without a word, Tianming pointed at the screen displaying the exam rules. Hisaka strolled over, read through them, and let out a soft, creepy laugh. "So I'm your first teammate. I look forward to working with you." With that, he casually slipped one of the 4 remaining bracelets onto his wrist. Seeing that Tianming wasn't interested in chatting, Hisoka didn't push it. He leaned against a wall and quietly waited for the remaining 3 teammates to arrive. Roughly 20 minutes later, another candidate fell into the room. Tianming glanced up, an unfamiliar face. A disposable side character. He couldn't be bothered to introduce himself and simply pointed at the monitor. The newcomer read the rules with growing anxiety, especially after realizing who his 2 teammates were. Recognizing both Hisoka and Tianming, he paled but reluctantly put on a bracelet and scurried into a corner like a terrified quail. An hour later, 2 more random candidates dropped in, completing the 5-man team. But the atmosphere was thick with tension. Everyone was on edge. Tianming ignored them. Hisoka made a few attempts to start the conversation but gave up after being stonewalled. Meanwhile, the 3 extras quietly huddled together in a makeshift alliance. Weak individually, but they had the numbers, 3 votes out of 5. After a short, whispered discussion, the first of the extras stepped forward and approached Tianming. "We'd like to nominate you as the team leader, for this round of the exam." Tianming blinked. "Me?" The guy nodded. "Yeah. We trust you more than we trust Hisoka. Please take charge and lead the team in voting." This, of course, was part of the extras' plan. They'd seen Tianming's strength during the second exam and assumed he could keep Hisoka in check. Best case scenario, the 2 monsters would cancel each other out, and they could just quietly tag along and collect their pass. Tianming glanced over at Hisoka, who gave a half-smile and raised no objection. Then Tianming raised his left hand, revealing his bracelet. "All right. Since you've chosen me as captain, the test begins now." Everyone nodded in agreement and tapped their bracelets to confirm the team formation. Click, click. The heavy iron door creaked open, revealing a dim passageway stretching into the unknown. The extras let out a breath of relief. Then they all turned warily toward Hisoka, fully expecting him to pull some creepy move. None of them wanted to walk in front of him, or behind him. But just as they were focused on keeping their distance from Hisoka, they overlooked one critical thing. The real danger wasn't behind them. It was beside them. In a blur, Tianming moved. Before any of them could react, he knocked all 3 of them unconscious, clean, quick, and merciless. They didn't even have time to scream. Even Hisoka's eyes widened. He watched, impressed, as Tianming stripped the bracelets off the now unconscious trio. "Ha ha ha. They trusted you so much. And you wiped them out in a second. I'm impressed. Seems I'll have to be extra careful around you, or even I might get caught off guard." Tianming, unfazed, replied coolly, "I'm doing them a favor. They're too weak. Even if they passed this floor, they'd be dead in the next one. Better they sit this one out and come back next year stronger. I'm saving their lives." Hisoka burst out laughing again. "And I thought I was shameless. But this guy? A true master. He knocks people out and says it's for their own good. He should run for office." Tianming slipped the 3 extra bracelets onto his arm, then turned toward the hallway. "Let's get moving. No need to waste time." Okay. The 2 of them stepped into the corridor, leaving behind 3 unconscious bodies. Meanwhile, deep below the tower, inside the monitoring room, a man with a sly face, round frame glasses, and a short mohawk hairstyle munched casually on a biscuit. This was Lipo, the examiner for the 3rd round of the hunter exam, the warden of the trap tower, and a licensed criminal hunter. He calmly twisted the biscuit apart, popped half into his mouth, and chewed slowly while watching the security feed showing Tianming's team. His 2 subordinates, however, were less composed. "That's a violation of exam protocol," one of them yelled, pointing at the monitor. He knocked out his own teammates. "Warden, you have to disqualify him." Lipo shrugged mid-bite. He didn't break any rules. The system only says that 5 people must be present for the test to begin. It doesn't say they have to stick together after that. The deputies went quiet. They knew the truth. Whether something violated the rules or not depended on Lipo's decision. And clearly, he wasn't inclined to eliminate Tianming over this. What Lipo didn't say out loud was this. Letting the team turn on each other was actually the intended point of the exam. This test was designed to challenge cooperation and betrayal. In the second half, the route would inevitably force them to make cutthroat decisions. Only 2 or 3 members could pass. The rest would be eliminated, willingly or not. By knocking his teammates out right away, Tianming had skipped half the drama and cleared the most difficult part in advance. In fact, the way Lipo saw it, the next stages were now meaningless for this group. There was no more internal conflict to exploit, and with Hisoka and Tianming paired up, there was no point in stalling. Both of them are clearly qualified. Still, for someone to be so cold and decisive, to knock out his own team before the test even truly began. Lipo's eyes narrowed. This guy Tianming. Definitely not normal. Chapter 13. Tianming and Hisoka continued down the dark corridor. Tianming used his observation haki along the way, not only to scout for nearby traps or ambushes, but also to keep tabs on Hisoka, who was a walking wildcard. The two were bored, so they made small talk. Well, Hisoka made small talk. Tianming mostly grunted replies. In his past life, Tianming had actually liked Hisoka as a character. He was essentially a chaotic ally of the protagonist group, designed by the author to blur the lines between friend and foe. Hisoka was dangerous, flamboyant, and unpredictable, a mix that made him fun to watch on screen. But meeting the man in person? Absolutely exhausting. He was talkative, nosy, manipulative, and constantly vibing on a creepy frequency. Tianming found himself wondering, how can I get rid of this guy without starting a fight? What Tianming didn't know was that Hisoka was thinking the exact same thing, but in reverse. He was wondering how he could use Tianming. After seeing Tianming's ruthlessness and strength earlier, Hisoka felt he had a lot in common with the Phantom Troop. The difference was, Tianming wasn't interested in killing weaklings, he only struck back when provoked. Still, that cold-blooded efficiency was something Hisoka admired. Maybe I could convince him to infiltrate the troop. Use him to distract Kurlo and the others while I go fruit-picking. Yes. Hisoka licked his lips at the thought. Tianming was a delicious fruit, and so was Kurlo. If one fruit could help him get to another. Ah, what a beautiful harvest it would be. Just as their inner monologues ran wild, the corridor suddenly opened into a vast chasm. They reached the edge of a giant deep pit, and ahead of them was a platform suspended in the middle of the gap, about 10 meters wide. The only way to continue forward was to cross the pit and reach the exit on the other side. But the pit was several dozen meters wide, impossible to jump across under normal circumstances. Clearly, the platform was meant for something, a duel. Moments later, several figures emerged from the opposite exit, menacing and rough-looking. The one in front, cloaked in gray and sporting a heavily scarred face, sneered. "So you're the candidates this time? TCH, you don't look that impressive." These men were prisoners serving century-long sentences, murderers, criminals, and lifers who'd been offered a rare deal, waste time for the candidates, and in exchange, get a 1-year sentence reduction per hour. Since the current round had a strict 72-hour limit, and the candidates had already used up over an hour just getting here, each prisoner could theoretically knock off up to 70 years from their sentence, if they stalled the team long enough. Scarface stepped forward and explained. "Each of us will face off against one of you. The duel's format can be negotiated, combat or a wager. It's a best of 5. Press the button on your bracelet if you agree." Hisoka casually raised his left hand to press his bracelet. But Tianming had already launched himself into the air. With a powerful step using moonwalk, he leapt across the chasm toward the prisoners. The inmates gasped. Flying was rare even among skilled fighters, but they quickly calmed down when they saw it was just one guy. Big mistake. They noticed Tianming had 4 bracelets on his arm. If they beat him, they could burn all his remaining time, 4 entire hours, and massively reduced their sentences. As Tianming soared toward them, he suddenly vanished in midair, then reappeared directly in front of them. What the hell? Before Scarface could finish the sentence, Tianming slammed him into the wall with a single punch. The man crumbled. The other 4 prisoners lunged at him. Tianming raised his fist and dropped them one after the other, crack, 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 crack. All 4 flew backwards, unconscious before they hit the floor. It had taken less than 10 seconds. Hisoka, watching from the other side, clapped politely. Decisive as always. You could have played with them for fun, you know. Why so eager? Tianming walked over to a switch on the wall and flipped it, activating a mechanism that extended a bridge across the chasm. As the platform extended, he answered, "These duels are pointless. We're martial artists, we have the advantage in close combat. Why throw that away and waste time playing by someone else's rules? That would be idiotic." The bridge finally locked into place. Hisoka walked across with a slight spring in his step. "You really let me cross? I thought for sure you'd retract the bridge halfway and make me jump." Tianming smirked, waving dismissively. "Please. I'd never abandon you. After all, I love you too much." He said it with a straight face, walking deeper into the tunnel. Hisoka chuckled and followed. As they continued forward, they passed through multiple corridors filled with traps and branching paths. But Tianming's observation haki revealed them all in advance. The 2 breezed through the test as if they had a guidebook. Then, just as they crossed into a spacious underground hall, a large figure stepped out from behind a stone pillar and blocked their way. He was tall and muscular, with long hair, wearing a vest made of animal hide. He looked like a caveman and radiated brute strength. Hisoka narrowed his eyes. He recognized him instantly. Tianming, meanwhile, muttered under his breath. "Oh, shit." Chapter 14. "Hiso, do you still recognize me after all this time?" The burly, long-haired man roared from across the hall. Hisoka smiled lazily. "Oh my, isn't this last year's useless examiner?" The comment hit home. The man, Nika, the former hunter exam proctor, instantly turned red with rage, and Tianming finally remembered who he was. Last year, Hisoka had participated in the hunter exam but was disqualified for severely injuring an examiner. That examiner was this guy. No doubt, he'd shown up now for revenge. Though seriously, he kinda looks like Yuvagin. Tianming nearly blurted it aloud before catching himself. If Hisoka picked up on that, he'd never hear the end of it. Seething, Nikan unsheathed 2 curved scimitars from his belt, each shaped like a ring blade with a vicious arc. "Hisoka," he growled. "Today's the day you die. I'll repay every bit of humiliation you gave me." With a roar, he flung 2 throwing knives toward Hisoka, then spun into a wide stance, his scimitars ready. The 4 blades rotated in the air, circling around Hisoka like boomerangs in a chaotic, unpredictable dance. Tianming calmly stepped back, arms folded, and watched with mild interest. This had nothing to do with him. Let the guy have his revenge match. Truth be told, Nika had some skill. His flying blades followed completely illogical arcs, erratic, nearly unreadable. Even with Hisoka's reaction time, he couldn't avoid them all. One blade grazed Hisoka's shoulder, drawing a thin line of blood. Nika grinned wickedly and called out, "Where's all that arrogance now? Look at you, helpless. Even if you beg, I won't let you go. Prepare to die, Hisoka." He hurled all 4 blades again, spinning like deadly wheels. But this time, Hisoka didn't dodge. He calmly reached out, caught 2 of the spinning blades midair, and, using them like scissors, deflected the other 2 with a clean clang. Sparks flew. Now all 4 of Nika's blades were in Hisoka's hands. And broken. Nika's eyes went wide in disbelief. It had taken him over a year of dedicated training just to perfect his flying blade technique. And Hisoka had countered it in a single, casual motion. Before he could move, Hisoka slashed once with the scimitars, cleanly decapitating him. The fight was over in an instant. Tianming stood silently, arms still crossed. That guy was an Nen user, he realized. I could sense it when he launched his attack. His aura had been faint compared to Hisoka's, but it had definitely been there. And yet, he got clapped in seconds. Even Killua could have handled that guy without Nen. Tianming sighed. He was growing more and more frustrated. Even this useless wannabe had unlocked Nen. Meanwhile, no matter how hard he trained, meditation, physical technique, even electrocuting himself, he couldn't feel the slightest trace of it. This is so unfair. Hisoka casually tossed the ruined scimitars aside and began walking toward the exit, until Tianming called out to him. Hisoka turned, raising an eyebrow. What's this? Did the blood get you all worked up? Tianming didn't mince words. Inject your Nen into me. I want to try unlocking it. Hisoka blinked in surprise, then broke into a delighted grin. So impatient he'd expected Tianming to wait for Netero's training after the exam, but it seemed the man couldn't wait. Gladly, Hisoka said, as he started unbuckling his pants. Tianming, who had been perfectly serious up until that moment, nearly choked on air. What the hell are you doing? With a wink, Hisoka replied, helping you awaken, of course. Tianming leapt backward like a cat, pointing at Hisoka's pants with pure horror. Don't take your pants off just to teach me Nen. Hisoka looked wounded. Oh come on, this is my unique method. I've used it to awaken plenty of people before. There's no danger, though it might sting a little. Just relax and enjoy. At this point, Hisoka had stripped down to nothing but his white briefs, slowly advancing. Tianming's expression twisted into full panic. This guy is insane. Screw you. He didn't hesitate. Tianming whipped out a land foot, Rankyaku, sending a sharp blue energy slash screaming through the air. Hisoka grinned and dodged with a flashy backflip, but his pants, unfortunately, weren't so lucky. Swoosh. The blade cleaved them in two. Hisoka looked at the shredded fabric dangling in his hand, then pouted dramatically. I was helping out of the goodness of my heart, and you ruined my pants. Now I have nothing to wear. Then his smile turned wicked. Looks like I'll have to borrow yours. With that, he blurred forward like a shadow. Tianming's expression hardened. He tightened his belt with both hands. Over my dead body. Hisoka's Nen aura surged. This time, he wasn't holding back. Tianming activated armament Haki, channeling it into his fists and legs. Their fists collided mid-charge, boom. The shockwave cracked the surrounding stone pillars and echoed through the entire underground hall. Both retreated a step, shaking off the impact. Tianming rotated his wrist and grinned. Humph. Your Nen feels heavy, but it's not as strong as Haki. Hisoka glanced at his now dislocated wrist, eyes gleaming with intrigue. He focused his Nen into his vision, Gyo, the high focus technique, and checked again. No Nen. None at all. Not even a trace. And yet, that pressure. That power. He licked his lips, thrilled. That punch had carried an overwhelming sense of domination. It was stronger than anything even Uvogin had ever hit him with, and Uvogin was supposed to be the strongest enhancer in the fandom troupe. What the hell are you, Tianming? Chapter 15. Tianming raised his leg and swept across with a powerful roundhouse kick. Hisoka crossed his arms to block, but the sheer force of the blow sent him skidding backward across the floor. Just as Tianming prepared to chase him down and finish the combo, he felt his foot lock up. His right foot was stuck, firmly glued to the floor. It was bungee gum. Hisoka had used bungee gum mid-attack to bind Tianming's foot to the ground. Tianming frowned and tried to yank his foot free, but it was incredibly sticky. No matter how hard he pulled, it snapped back down like a rubber band. Without knowledge of Nen, he couldn't even see what the invisible ability binding him looked like. Suddenly, a flurry of playing cards whipped toward his face like razors. In a split-second response, Haki burst out from his legs in a shockwave. The surrounding floor tiles and the Nen gum anchoring him shattered under the force. Free, he launched off with shave, disappearing just in time to avoid the incoming cards. The underground hall shook from the speed and force of their clash. Back in the monitoring room, Warden Lieber's 2 deputies were cheering wildly like kids watching a tournament. They were Nen users themselves, but only on the surface. After learning the basics, they'd plateaued and never developed real Nen abilities. Still, they couldn't help but act like armchair warriors. "Incredible," one of them said. "They're strong, sure, but if we got serious, I bet we could beat one of them." Lieber, the actual expert, was sweating bullets. Idiots. They had no clue how massive the gulf was. From his professional analysis, Hisoka was a transmutation-type Nen user, deadly in real combat. Transmuters were known for unpredictable abilities, strong close-quarters techniques, and strategic deception. Their Nen output could still reach 80% of Enhancer class power, making them formidable even in raw strength. Lieber figured if he fought Hisoka, he'd probably be dead the moment Bungee Gum touched him. But Tianming? Tianming, who didn't even appear to have activated Nen, had broken free from Bungee Gum multiple times, with brute force alone. His raw physical strength was rare even among high-level enhancers. That wasn't just unusual, it was borderline monstrous. And then, there was Hisoka's perversion. Every time Tianming broke free and tried to go on the offensive, Hisoka would counter with a high kick. Now, the kick itself wasn't dangerous. Tianming could easily dodge it. But Hisoka was currently dressed in nothing but tight white briefs. Whenever he kicked, something swayed. The sight was so disturbing it derailed Tianming's attacks. Lieber chuckled, then turned to a second screen showing Gon, Killua, Leorio, and Kurapika, still dealing with the prisoner matchups. He wondered what would happen when this group eventually reunited. He reached for a biscuit, only to freeze. Unpleasant images of Hisoka's high kicks flashed through his brain. Nope. Not hungry anymore. Meanwhile, back in the hall, Tianming had had enough. He stopped, face twisted in disgust. "Can you not? I'm begging you, stop flaunting your 2 tails of meat like it's something sacred." Hisoka smirked devilishly. "Oh? Just because you see something doesn't mean it exists. And just because you don't see something doesn't mean it doesn't exist." Tianming groaned. "I'm not doing this. If you keep playing like this, I'm done. I'll walk to the finish line and let you fight me there. If you attack me in the lounge, you'll be disqualified." It was a bluff, but it had a purpose. He was trying to goad Hisoka into fighting seriously. Hisoka nodded. "I agree. It's getting a bit dull. And I've confirmed it now, you really don't have Nen. Or at least, you can't project it outside your body like a standard user." Tianming frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" Hisoka snapped his fingers. Suddenly, the walls, floor, and ceiling shimmered, and hundreds of playing cards seemed to emerge from nowhere, suspended in the air. "You thought I was just playing tag with you? I've been leaving traps everywhere." As he spoke, the cards shot toward Tianming from every direction like a storm of blades. Tianming instantly expanded his observation hockey to its fullest range. He extended both index fingers, took a deep breath, and shouted, "Flying finger gun!" Bang 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 bang. His index fingers became twin machine guns, unleashing rapid-fire shockwave bullets that blasted the incoming cards apart. Paper fragments rained across the hall. Dozens of cards shredded, but Tianming's body was under immense strain. He had already been overusing the 6 styles, moonwalk, shave, finger gun, and more. His joints were throbbing. He was just about to activate Life Return to start cellular repair when suddenly, his observation hockey screamed. A death warning. What? What did I miss? He didn't hesitate. His entire body was instantly reinforced with armament hockey, and he activated Iron Body, Steel, his highest level of defense. Shunk. 6 cards embedded themselves into his body, slipping past his weakened defenses. Wait. Where had those come from? Then he noticed it. Hisoka's pants, the ones he'd thrown aside earlier, were gone. The realization hit like a brick. They were fake. Hisako had disguised a bunch of plain cords as pants, hiding them in plain sight until the moment was right. Now it was too late. With the final wave of attacks, dozens of remaining cards struck Tianming, pinning into his arms, legs, shoulders, turning him into a literal human hedgehog. Chapter 16. In the monitoring room, seeing Tianming pierced all over by plain cards like a hedgehog, the two assistant wardens started chatting with smug smiles. "It looks like the winner's been decided. I didn't expect that guy, Tianming, to last this long. Yeah. Not once did we see any trace of Nen on him. Do you think he really hasn't awakened Nen, or could he be hiding it completely? Doesn't matter either way, this fight's over. That Tianming guy was all brawn and no brains. Even if he didn't have Nen, he should have fought smarter instead of rushing around like a wild beast." They weren't totally wrong. Tianming's style of fighting did seem reckless and unlike anyone else's in this world. And so, to them, he came off as nothing more than a brute. No matter how strong, a beast was still a beast. In their eyes, raw power would always fall short against a refined Nen user. Just as they were about to switch the feed to another candidate, Lieber, who'd been silent this whole time, suddenly spoke up. "Hold on, did you not see that?" "See what?" He pointed to Tianming's screen. "Look closely. All those plain cards stuck on him. Not a single one drew blood. They're just stuck to his body, they didn't even cut through his clothes." Now that they were really looking, the two assistants were stunned. The sharp cards were clearly in contact with Tianming's skin, but they hadn't pierced it at all. It was like they were just gently pinned to his outer layer. Not a scratch. Not a drop of blood. What? How is that even possible? Blocking a Nen-infused attack with your body, without injury? Is he even human? The two assistants couldn't wrap their heads around it, but Lieber stayed calm. He'd seen more than enough in this world to believe anything was possible. This was the hunter world, after all. From rare items to strange abilities, there were plenty of beings out there whose sheer toughness could render conventional attacks useless. And Hisako hadn't even been going all out. Sure, he launched a barrage of cards, but none were aimed at vital points. At most, they could have caused serious injury, not death. Lieber calmly popped another biscuit into his mouth, until the screen showed something that made him freeze mid-bite. Hisako's Nen suddenly began to vibrate violently where it clung to Tianming. And then, like a balloon popping, it burst outward. All the cards stuck to Tianming were blown away, torn to shreds in midair. And there Tianming stood, now completely enveloped in a faint white aura of newly awakened Nen. Lieber's biscuit slipped out of his hand and fell to the floor. The two assistants were no better. One staggered back, the other collapsed to the ground in fright. What kind of monster is this? Back inside the hall, Tianming had been expecting to take some injuries. But as the cards landed, he realized the force behind them was much weaker than he anticipated. Thanks to the layers of bungee gum coating him, and the sheer absurdity of this situation, Tianming sensed something off. It was faint, but inside him stirred a force, hot, erratic, and unfamiliar. This had to be it, Nen. Hisako really had helped him open his aura nodes. Tianming stood still, focused, and tried to draw that strange energy out. With effort, the Nen inside him erupted like steam from a boiling kettle. It blasted away Hisako's aura in an instant, shredding the surrounding cards. What surprised Tianming the most wasn't the fact that he'd finally awakened Nen, it was the sheer volume of it. His aura was massive, explosive, like a geyser bursting from deep underground. It felt like being plunged into scalding hot water. Was this really his power? The walls shook. The floors trembled. His Nen pulsed outward, blanketing the entire trap tower. Elsewhere in the tower, Gon and the others had been gambling with a group of prisoners when the energy hit. The moment it washed over them, they were frozen in place. Gon looked around, heart racing. The pressure. It was crushing. It felt like his very soul was being strangled. Even the 5 prisoners they were fighting had passed out cold from the sheer terror. Leorio and Tonpa were also out cold on the ground. Only Kurapika and Gon managed to stay conscious, barely, each holding on to the wall for support. Then Gon noticed Killua. He was crouched in the corner, shivering. His face pale, his body rigid. It was unlike anything Gon had ever seen from him. But something else shocked Gon even more. Killua was releasing a faint aura of his own. Not as overwhelming as Tianming's, but definitely the same type of energy. Killua. You. Meanwhile, in a different corridor filled with traps, Illumi, disguised under the alias Jitarakar, clutched the wall and looked silently in the direction of Tianming's explosion of aura. His face was calm, eerily calm. His expression, unchanged by the aura, held only interest. Hisoka might have helped open Tianming's aura. But whatever had just awakened inside Tianming was something else entirely. Something dangerous. Something world-shaking. Chapter 17. What a strong aura. This aura is already enough to rival my father. No. The fighting power is still rising. Grandfather. Great-grandfather. Illumi kept calculating the combat power, and finally, Tianming's aura reached the level of his great-great-grandfather, Mahazoldik. What a scary guy. Is he the one named Tianming who's close to Killua? Such a powerful being actually came to take part in the hunter examination. What is this guy planning? After pausing for a moment, he continued toward the finish line. No matter what Tianming's purpose was, it had nothing to do with him. If any accident occurred, he would just take Killua away as soon as possible. Tianming's outburst of Nen caused chaos throughout the entire trick tower, and his condition wasn't very good at the moment. The Nen within his body was indeed very powerful, even the haki he had cultivated for many years was suppressed by it. However, this power was far harder to control than haki. He tried to manage it using his haki control method but quickly found that the two couldn't be handled the same way. Just then, Hisoka, who had been hiding in the shadows, walked out from behind a stone pillar. It's something inherent to your body and part of your spirit. You can't control it just by manipulating your muscles. The more excited you are, the more violently it reacts. You have to calm yourself down before it can calm down too, he explained. Tianming followed his suggestion, took a deep breath, and forced himself to calm down. Sure enough, the Nen within him gradually reduced from the state of a high-pressure hose to a controlled faucet stream. He then began to imagine wrapping the Nen around his body. This was one of the 4 major principles of Nen, and a sign that a person had truly awakened it. But just as he managed to settle his Nen, his haki, which had been suppressed, suddenly surged wildly. It counterattacked and began clashing with the Nen in his body. Tianming was stunned. He tried to suppress both forces, but it was futile. The two were like fire and water, fine on their own, but explosive when combined. Once active at the same time, they went berserk and became uncontrollable. His stamina began to plummet from trying to maintain both. Worse still, the rate at which Nen consumed energy was several times higher than haki. If things continued, he'd collapse from exhaustion. In the end, he gritted his teeth and forced his haki to suppress the Nen. After all, he'd been cultivating haki for decades and was much more experienced with it. Not fully understanding Nen yet, he decided to suppress it temporarily. The violent clash inside his body gradually ceased and finally disappeared entirely. It was as if nothing had happened, and silence fell over the hall once more. Drained, he walked over to a stone pillar, leaned against it, and gasped for air. Hisoka approached with a curious expression. How hot? The aura was boiling hot a moment ago, it even got my blood pumping. Why did it vanish so suddenly? Tianming looked up at Hisoka. Although there was some dust on his outfit, he was largely intact. Even his pants were still on properly. So the earlier wardrobe malfunction must have been a trick, an illusion created using his Nen. But Tianming wasn't in the mood to joke. He was preoccupied with how to handle the incompatibility between his Nen and haki. It seemed impossible to maintain both at once. So he was left with three paths. First, give up on Nen and focus only on Haki, but this would be difficult. His physical limit was already near, and Haki relied heavily on the body. Without growth in his physique, he couldn't expect to break through like before. Second, abandon Haki and dedicate himself to Nen cultivation. Based on the ore he had just released, he'd certainly reach the top ranks in this world if he focused entirely on Nen. But the thought of giving up Haki, it didn't sit right. He'd trained it for decades. It was second nature now, like his arms and legs. Letting it go wouldn't be easy. Third, and the most ambitious option, find a way to combine Haki and Nen into a new power, one that incorporated the essence of both. It was a wild idea. The very concept of merging two supernatural forces from different worlds was absurd. But if anyone could succeed, they'd likely become a legend, a founder of a new path. That thought lit a fire inside him. As the saying goes, if you want to succeed, you have to go crazy first. He had made it all the way to the hunter world, and now that his Nen had awakened, even if he couldn't use it freely yet, he had to try. Otherwise, he'd be wasting his once-in-a-lifetime chance. Besides, he reminded himself, his IQ had once tested at 139. Just 1 point short of the official genius threshold. That made him the king of the smart not genius crowd. Surely he could figure it out. After gathering his resolve, he turned to Hisoka. So this was your so-called method of helping me awaken Nen? Tianming narrowed his eyes. Even though Hisoka had attacked him, the blows weren't fatal, and he had later offered real guidance. So Tianming believed the intent had been genuine. But it still annoyed him. He hated being played like a pawn. Hisoka smirked, I told you, my method is unique. With your strength, it would only leave some scratches at most. If you couldn't handle that, there'd be no point in awakening Nen. Might as well die here. Tianming took a deep breath and smiled brightly. Thanks for your help. But my Nen's unstable right now, I need to wait a bit before I can fully control it. He then pointed ahead. The finish line's not far. Let's wrap up this sporing test already. With that, he turned and walked off calmly. Hisoka chuckled and prepared to follow. But Tianming's figure vanished. Eyes widening, Hisoka instinctively dodged, but he was still a split second too slow. Thwack! Tianming reappeared and delivered a fierce kick, directly to Hisoka's crotch. Hisoka collapsed immediately, eyes rolled back and body twitching violently. Standing above him, Tianming declared, I've done the math. With your strength, that hit will only leave superficial injuries. If you can't take something like that, then you might as well die here. Ha 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 tilde. Chapter 18. Tap tap tap. Illumi, disguised as Jitalagu, walked out of the dark passage and saw a pair of black double doors in front of him. This was the exit gate of the trap tower. As long as one walked out of here, they would complete the third hunter exam. However, this door would only open when the time came. Even if someone arrived early, they would not be able to complete the test until then. He glanced around and found that besides himself, there were two others who had arrived earlier. These two people were Tianming and Hisoka. Tianming sat cross-legged in a corner with his eyes closed, meditating. Hisoka leaned against a wall, fiddling with the cards in his hand as if nothing had happened. But Illumi couldn't help noticing that Hisoka's posture looked a bit off, as if he didn't dare squeeze his legs together too tightly. He and Hisoka simply exchanged glances. In fact, they had known each other for a long time. However, due to the presence of an outsider, Tianming, and the surveillance of the examiners, they did not acknowledge each other and instead pretended they were strangers. Each found a corner and quietly waited for the door to open. As time passed, more candidates arrived at the finish line one after another. Tianming also ended his meditation and slowly opened his eyes. He looked up into the dark corridor and saw 4 teenagers and a middle-aged man walking out with relaxed strides. They were gone and the others. According to the original timeline, they should have lost dozens of hours betting with the prisoners, and barely arrived just before the third exam's time limit. However, Due to Tianming's earlier outburst, Gon and Killua had turned disaster into fortune. All their prisoner opponents had fainted, allowing them to pass the toughest part and easily reach the finish line. Gon, upon seeing Tianming, ran over excitedly and greeted him. "Tianming, you really got here early. That thing we felt back in the tower. Was that you?" He almost said Nen, but changed his words at the last second, remembering that Tianming had said it was a hunter secret. Tianming nodded and said, "Indeed, that was me. But it was just an accident." Hearing this, Leorio and Kurapika both gasped. Gon clenched his fists excitedly. Only Killua stayed relatively calm, though also impressed. He concealed his emotions well. After all, being from the Zoldyck family, he had undergone harsh training since childhood. No matter how excited he was, he wouldn't show it outwardly. Their conversation was overheard by the other candidates. Although they didn't know what exactly they were talking about, they could guess it had to do with the terrifying aura they had sensed earlier. Hanzo, Pakal, Badoro, and the rest had been terrified by that aura. It felt like the devil himself was reaching out to grab their hearts. To learn that the source of that aura was a normal-looking human was utterly shocking. Now they looked at Tianming with deep fear, silently praying that this monster, who they now considered on par with or even scarier than Hisoka, would never turn his sights on them. "You're amazing, Tianming," Gon exclaimed excitedly. "It's nothing. But why do you guys feel a little different?" He had already sensed the strange aura in them during his earlier meditation. Although his attempt at awakening Nen had failed, it wasn't without benefit. His observation haki was becoming sharper, and it was now on the verge of breaking through to a new level. That meant he could sense minute changes in the aura of others more clearly than ever. Killua put his hands in his pockets and walked up to Tianming, chin raised. "I've gotta say, this stuff's actually useful. Thanks for the tip earlier." He then raised his right hand, gathering aura onto his index finger in a display of proper Nen usage. Even though Tianming couldn't use Gyo, he could still faintly feel Nen. When he realized Killua had awakened his Nen, his eyes widened in surprise. He had previously told Killua that he was only one step away from awakening, but he assumed it would take the kid at least a month of self-training to reach it. Could his talent really be that insane? Just a few words were all it took? At that moment, Tianming sensed a trace of killing intent. Turning his head, he saw Illumi retracting his gaze. Tianming narrowed his eyes. What was that about? Was Illumi mad because Killua had awakened his Nen? Ungrateful mutt. Killua awakened on his own. I didn't force open his life chakra points or anything. How is this my fault? Tianming was already annoyed from failing to awaken his own Nen. If Illumi caused trouble, he wouldn't hold back. He'd beat him until his own mother couldn't recognize him, though maybe that ship had already sailed. As Tianming drifted in thought, Gon and Kurapika mimicked Killua's earlier demonstration, focusing their Nen on their fingertips. Clearly, they had also unlocked their abilities. Tianming's jaw nearly dropped. These guys were treating Nen like it was the flu, one catches it, two more follow. Newbies opening their Nen by learning from another newbie? Weren't they afraid of screwing it up and turning into vegetables? Then he looked toward Leorio. Among the four, he was the only one who didn't show off. That seemed out of character. Leorio rubbed the back of his head sheepishly. I tried, but I was too tired. It was actually pretty scary, haha. Yeah, laugh it up, Tianming thought. You failed to awaken and still didn't keel over. You lucky bastard. Tianming rushed over and grabbed Leorio's wrist to check his condition. Thankfully, Leorio had only drained his stamina. Once the third test ended and they got some rest, he'd recover just fine. Still, Tianming gave him a stern warning. Next time, wait for an official hunter to be present before trying to awaken Nen again. He was lucky this time, but it could have ended much worse. Leorio nodded, a bit embarrassed. All his friends had awakened Nen, and he was the only one still a normie. But after this near miss, he felt sure he could do it next time under proper guidance. The group waited another day and night, and finally, early the next morning, the trap tower's doors slowly creaked open. Sunlight poured through the widening crack, and 3 figures emerged from the light. It was Examiner Lieber and his 2 assistants. Chapter 19. The 4th round of the Hunter test was held on a small island called Jinbei Island. However, strangely, the examiner for the 4th round did not show up. Instead, Lipo, the examiner for the 3rd round, introduced the test rules to everyone. The test site is on this small island. Next, everyone's hunting target will be determined by drawing lots. As long as you get the number plate of your hunting target, you can get 3 points. Your own number plate can also be counted as 3 points. Number plates that do not belong to the hunting target can only be counted as 1 point. The test will be over in a week, and by then, candidates with 6 points will have passed the test, and those who do not have 6 points will be eliminated. All the candidates stood straight, listening attentively to the rules of the competition. Only Tianming looked casually toward the small island not far away. He already knew the rules of this test. To put it bluntly, isn't it just tearing off name tags? He had to say that Togashi's game design ideas were really ahead of their time. This routine was still often used in variety shows decades later. The guy could have made a lot of money even if he didn't draw manga but worked as a variety show planner. There was another reason why he didn't care about the exam rules. He thought he had already won the test. With just a thought, his observation haki spread outward from him like a sound wave. In just a moment, the ship they were standing on and half of the island were under his surveillance. He could see all the animals, plants, and even the hidden staff of the Hunter Association on the island. Hisaka's help in opening his mind wasn't completely useless. Under the impact of Nen, his haki had also improved. His observation haki had fully awakened, granting him the same super long-range reconnaissance ability as an L. Before, his observation haki could only scan things within a diameter of 200 meters at most. Now, it could cover half of the island, and that was from the edge. If he stood in the center, he could likely scan the entire island. The feeling of observing the enemy from a long distance made him very excited. In his previous life, his observation haki had also awakened, but it had focused more on precision than range. However, this ability was of little use in the pirate world, where everyone relied on brute strength and endurance. He had always hoped to awaken this kind of long-range ability. Now, finally, he had. Just as he was daydreaming, a sudden voice beside him interrupted his thoughts. "Hey! Tianming, it's your turn." Tianming snapped back to reality and looked up, only to see Gon staring at him eagerly, and the other candidates giving him impatient looks. It turned out the drawing of lots had already begun. Tianming was the first to reach the finish line in the previous test, so he was the first to draw. Everyone else was waiting on him. Feeling a little embarrassed, he hurried to the lottery box and reached in casually, wanting to pick a number and get it over with. Just as he reached out, Lipo stopped him. Tianming looked at Lipo in confusion, only to hear him say, "You don't have to draw lots. I just spoke to Chairman Netero on the phone. You can pass the 4th round of the Hunter test directly. Then you can wait with us on the boat for the other candidates to finish their exams so that you can take part in the 5th round with them." Tianming frowned at first. He had wanted to test out his newly awakened observation haki, but this sudden direct promotion caught him off guard. Still, if he thought about it, there wasn't much fun in hunting rookies. More importantly, this round lasted a whole week. He could stay on the boat, eat and drink well, and read books about Nen. Why suffer out in the wild? So he agreed readily. But at that moment, one of the less intelligent candidates began to raise objections. A candidate named Chief shouted, "Why does this guy get to be promoted directly? What kind of shady operation is this Hunter Association pulling?" The staff of the association all looked at him with a half-smile, clearly unimpressed. Lipo curled his lip in disdain and didn't even bother to explain. Only Bourbon, standing not far away, covered his mouth and whispered, "Did your brain get fried in the maze earlier?" Chief didn't like having his mouth covered, so he pushed Bourbon's hand away and glared at him, ready to start a fight if the explanation didn't satisfy him. Bourbon explained helplessly, "It's good for us if that guy gets promoted. The number of candidates who can pass changes every year, so even if Tianming passes directly, it won't affect our chances." He lowered his voice, "It's best if monsters like him are promoted early. That way we don't have to compete with him for points. You don't want to become his target, right?" Even though he whispered, everyone present had sharp hearing, and they all caught his words clearly. They all understood Tianming's strength, on the same level as that monster Hisoka. Even Kurapika, who knew him best, thought Tianming might be even scarier than Hisoka. If this monster's target was them, or if he was too lazy to hunt his designated target and just attacked random people, then they could die just for being nearby. The idea sent a chill through the group. Dealing with Hisoka was bad enough. Adding Tianming to the mix was a nightmare. Originally, some had hoped the two monsters would clash and take each other out, but after learning they had reached the previous finish line together, that hope vanished. Tianming and Hisoka were monsters, but they weren't stupid. Even if they wanted to kill each other, they would wait until the other candidates were eliminated first. So it was better to just promote them both and be done with it. After that brief interruption, the fourth round officially began. Candidates landed on the island one after another and started a week-long contest of hunting and survival, while Tianming returned to the ship and dove into the library. The ship's library had many books about Nen. Maybe people who practice Nen treat these books like how others treat yoga manuals, as light spiritual reading. But Tianming could immediately see the real value of these books. Chapter 20. A week passed in a flash, and Tianming sat in the ship's library prepared by the Hunter Association, cross-legged and reading a book about Nen. The title of this book was Healthy Breathing Methods. It didn't explicitly mention Nen, but generally referred to it as a kind of energy within the human body. However, Tianming could still tell from the book's descriptions that it was discussing Nen abilities. The book briefly described the basic concepts such as Ten, Zetsu, Ren, and Hatsu. However, the content was written in a very abstract way, and the author didn't even confirm whether this energy truly existed, calling it a human fantasy. At the end of the book, it even said the contents of this book are for reference only, which made things even more obvious. Tianming could be 100% sure the author was definitely a Nen user. But since Nen abilities couldn't be made public knowledge, the author had hidden them under vague language. To be honest, if a normal person read this book, they would probably think it was a bunch of nonsense written to fill pages. Even if someone actually tried to study it, they wouldn't get anything out of it. Without a foundational understanding of Nen, the book would read like it was written in a foreign language. Just as Tianming was carefully studying this sacred text, a man in a suit with a buzz cut and sunglasses suddenly walked into the library. The suited man approached Tianming and said expressionlessly, "Candidate Zhao Tianming, the fourth round of the Hunter exam has ended. Please proceed to the candidate lounge and wait for the fifth round to begin." Tianming nodded, closed the book, put it back on the shelf, and followed the man out of the library. Don't be fooled by this guy's ordinary appearance, he was actually one of the examiners of the fourth Hunter exam. Over the past few days, Tianming had used his observation hockey to monitor the island. He had already discovered that there wasn't just one examiner for the fourth round, there was a whole group of them. They concealed themselves and followed the candidates around to observe everything. This guy was the examiner in charge of monitoring Hisoka. Tianming was led to the examinee lounge. Even before arriving, he saw Gon and Kurapika standing at the bow of the ship, quietly talking. Gon's eyes were red, and tear marks still stained his cheeks. It was obvious he had just been crying and hadn't wiped away his tears. Tianming knew the reason. Although he'd been reading on the ship, he'd also used his observation hockey to monitor everything on the island. Just like in the original series, Gon's target was Hisoka. Although he had managed to grab Hisoka's badge, he had been ambushed and lost both Hisoka's and his own badge in the process. Originally, Gon was supposed to be eliminated in the 4th round. But Hisoka retrieved both badges and handed them to him, allowing him to pass. This damaged Gon's self-esteem, so he had come here to cry. This kid really had a strong sense of pride. If it were only Oreo, he probably would have begged Hisoka to work for him full-time. Gon is going to be a tough opponent in the next round. Anyone else would surrender after a good beating, but this guy would rather die than give up. Hopefully, I don't get unlucky and draw him as my opponent in the first match. Tianming entered a lounge, where the room was already full of candidates who had passed the 4th exam. Ignoring the gazes of others, he walked to a corner and waited silently. Not long after, the ship's intercom announced, "Candidates whose names are called, please come to room 204. Chairman Netero would like to speak with you privately." Everyone perked up after hearing that. The next round was the final exam, and passing it meant receiving a hunter license. No one wanted to fail now when they were so close to the finish line. Hisoka's name was called first, followed by Pakul and Badoro. Hanzo and Leorio sat trembling with nerves in the lounge. Tianming sighed. These guys had already made it this far, why were they still so scared? After Badoro, it was Tianming's turn. With everyone's attention on him, he exited the lounge and arrived at Netero's room. The room's decor was simple, which Tianming liked. When he opened the door, he saw Netero sitting at a tea table. Tianming closed the door behind him and took a seat without hesitation. "You've been reading a lot of books in the library these past few days," Netero said with a smile. "It's fine. Just some basic knowledge about Nen, somewhat useful, but not very practical." After hearing Tianming's answer, Netero stroked his beard and looked him up and down. "I heard you've already started using Nen, but I can't sense any aura on you. Are you that proficient in Zetsu?" Just as Tianming was about to explain his unique case, Netero raised a hand to stop him. "We'll discuss that after the exam is over. First, answer my question. Of all the remaining candidates, who are you most concerned about, and who do you least want to face in combat?" He pointed at the table in front of him. On it were 9 photos, the other 9 candidates besides Tianming. Tianming glanced at them, then pointed to Illumi and Gon. "The one I'm most concerned about is this guy with all the pins in his face. He's hiding his presence well, but I can feel he's no ordinary person. The one I least want to fight is Gon. His strength isn't high, but he's the stubborn type, too much trouble to deal with." Tianming's concern with Illumi came from the moment he sensed killing intent from him. Though Illumi hadn't made a move yet, Operation-type Nen users were notoriously tricky. Once you're caught, it's almost impossible to escape. As for lying to Netero or hiding his thoughts, there was no point. Someone as strong as Netero would see through it immediately. Netero nodded and signaled that Tianming could leave. After Tianming left, he pulled out a whiteboard from under the table and wrote down the names of those Tianming cared about and didn't want to fight, forming part of the match rankings. The questioning session was short. After just over an hour, Netero had finished speaking with all the candidates and determined the match order. A few hours later, the 5th round of the Hunter exam officially began. Chairman Netero gathered all the examiners and candidates at the training ground and displayed a board with the tournament bracket. Everyone's heart skipped a beat. Was this a single elimination format? That meant only one winner could become a hunter? Seeing the confusion, Netero quickly clarified. This round is indeed an elimination format, but only one person will be eliminated. As long as you win one match, you pass. Only the person who fails to win any match will be eliminated. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief. Winning just one match was much more doable. Chapter 21. Tianming had a deep memory of the battle sequence of this exam, especially the battle between Gon and Hanzo. At that time, he applauded Gon's rogue way of winning, but he didn't expect that he would get his comeuppance now. Hanzo was assigned to Group B and his opponent became Leorio. Instead, he replaced the opponent's position to fight against Gon. If this match follows normal rules, Tianming is confident that he can be 100 Gons. It will be useless for this guy to create shadow clones, and he will definitely be beaten to death. The problem is that in this exam, the opponent must admit defeat in person to win, and killing is not allowed, which is very disadvantageous to the stronger party. As long as the weaker party grits its teeth and refuses to surrender, the stronger party will not be able to win the game no matter what means it uses. In particular, Tianming does not have the tricks to control the enemy's will, and he cannot control the enemy to surrender like Illumi. The key is that his opponent is gone. This guy is stubborn and has a strong will like an iron bastard. Once his stubborn temper comes up, he will never surrender even if he dies. This makes Tianming feel like a dog biting a hedgehog and has no idea where to start. After the list was announced, President Netero added a few more words, and then the fifth and final round of the Hunter exam officially began. The first match was started by Group B. The other candidates came to the spectator seats to watch the match, leaving only Hisoka and Kurapika, who were playing in Group B's first match, on the field. Kurapika at this time is completely different from the original. During the third test, Killua opened his Nen and also awakened his Nen ability. Although he cannot use the basic Nen ability yet, his combat power is far stronger than that of ordinary people, and he has the ability to cause damage to other Nen users. As the referee announced the start of the match, Kurapika pulled out the two short knives hidden in his nunchaku and slashed at Hisoka frantically. Hisoka did not fight head-on but instead dodged left and right and relied on his agile body to maneuver around Kurapika. The two of them fought a desperate battle in this wide training ground. However, this desperate fight was only for Kurapika. Although he had activated his Nen ability, his overall strength was still not comparable to Hisoka. Hisoka easily gave a side kick and knocked Kurapika to the ground, unable to get up for a long time. However, Kurapika did not give up and gritted his teeth to stand up again. In this match, as long as he did not surrender, Hisoka could not do anything to him. In this way, the two sides fought back and forth for dozens of rounds. Kurapika fell down again and again but eventually got up. The battle between the two sides was at a stalemate for a while. At this moment Hisoka suddenly changed his strategy. He flew to Kurapika's side, then leaned over and whispered something in his ear. Tianming, who possesses observation haki, heard everything Hisoka said. "I have information about the spider. If you want to get it, cooperate with me." After saying this, under the gaze of Kurapika's shocked and angry bloodshot eyes, he directly announced to the referee that he surrendered. Everyone was very confused after seeing this scene. The fight between the two was inexplicable. It was obvious that Hisoka had the upper hand, and even if the opponent did not surrender, he should have thought of other ways. Why did he suddenly whisper a few words and then surrender? Tianming looked at Hisoka's back and fell into deep thought. Hisoka knew about the feud between Kurapika and the Phantom Troop, and it seemed that he had investigated the information about the Kurta clan and Kurapika before. But why did he insist on cooperating with Kurapika? Kurapika's strength at this time was not very strong. Why could he conclude that Kurapika could help him restrain the members of the troop? With these doubts, Tianming walked into the training ground, and standing in front of him was Gon, whose eyes were full of fighting spirit. Looking at the hot-blooded and stubborn man in front of him, Tianming sighed and said, "You should know how big the gap in strength is between us. You should admit defeat now and save your energy for the next duel." Upon hearing this, Gon shook his head like a rattle, clenched his fists, and had a determined look in his eyes. "I must win and get my hunter license. I will not give up in order to see my father." Tianming's eyes were full of helplessness. He had no interest in fighting with this weakling kid. Even though the referee had announced the start of the game, he did not make any move. He just stood there thinking about life with no hope in his life. Gon was so angry when he saw him like this, he immediately flashed in front of him and punched him in the stomach. However, the expected scene of Tianming being knocked flying did not appear. He just stood there in a trance, without any reaction at all, as if he did not feel Gon's fist. Gon was stunned for a moment, then his eyes became firm again. He swung his fists into phantoms and kept hitting Tianming, Bang bang bang. Fists kept hitting Tianming like machine guns. Tianming looked helpless at first, until he burst out laughing. At this moment, Gon looked like a little puppy whose teeth hadn't grown yet. He used his cherry-like mouth to bite your arm with all his strength. His cute and ferocious look makes girls' hearts almost overflow with joy. No wonder Hisoka is so obsessed with Gon. When he grows up, this guy will probably be a handsome guy at the Three Beauties level and a sunny and cheerful person. But looking at the character of Gon's father, Gene Freaks, Gon might become a useless uncle with a stubble on his face when he grows up. If that happens, this apple tree will really be growing crooked. Looking at Tianming, who laughed and then daydreamed again, Gon couldn't help but point at him and yell, "Tianming, you are underestimating me." Tianming was startled by his loud roar, and felt a little embarrassed when he saw the guy's flushed face. No, don't talk nonsense. I don't look down on you, I just suddenly remembered something interesting. What's interesting? Gon asked curiously. That's not important. Anyway, you should just surrender quickly. There's no point in us fighting like this. Upon hearing this, Gon fell into silence, and then a stream of golden energy from his body gushed out along his skin. The experts in Nen at the scene widened their eyes in surprise. They instantly realized that Gon was in the Ten state, one of the 4 basic forms of Nen. This is a technique that allows the Nen user to generate extra energy. Even though it is only the basic 4 elements, it is not easy to master. Gon is a wild person who was awakened accidentally and was able to comprehend this technique by relying on his own feeling. This talent can be called a genius among geniuses. After seeing this scene, Hisoka licked his lips excitedly. He was really excited about Gon's growth. Compared with him, even Tianming had become dim in his eyes. All the light was focused on Gon alone. Chapter 22. In fact, Tianming wasn't someone who couldn't accept losing, and he could accept surrendering if he really had no other choice, but the feeling of doing so still made him furious. He had once been a highly intelligent figure in the pirate world. Admirals like Sengoku and Tsuru respected his opinions deeply, and for a time, he even served as a naval strategist. But ever since he arrived in the hunter world, he found himself reduced to a brute force fighter. Everyone in this world was scheming and not particularly strong, yet they relied on layers of tedious rules. Even someone like him, standing at the top of the pyramid, would find it frustrating to navigate through such complications. Watching Gon punching at him again, Tianming's body seemed as thin as a sheet of paper as he easily dodged the boy's attacks. Gon's punch missed, and he threw another wild swing without hesitation. But to Tianming, it was slow and unskilled, just a flailing punch. He could avoid it even without using paper drawing. Finally, Tianming couldn't take it anymore and raised his hand to signal Gon to stop. Gon pulled his fist back and asked breathlessly, "Why are you stopping again? Are you trying to get me to surrender?" Tianming shook his head. "No, I'm not telling you to give up. I just noticed something wrong with your punching technique." Gon blinked, surprised, as Tianming continued explaining without waiting for a response. "The correct way to punch starts with your footwork. You generate power from the ground." As he spoke, he stomped his right foot on the floor and demonstrated. In the spectator seats, Lee Oreo and Pakal, both amateurs in combat, tried mimicking the force-generating technique that Tianming had just explained. Kurapika and the others didn't join in but silently committed the details to memory, preparing to practice them later. "Your previous attacks were just wild swings. No technique, barely any power. Try it again using what I just showed you." Tianming then pulled out a 1-meter square floor tile over 20 centimeters thick. Gon inhaled deeply and threw a punch using the proper form. Boom! The tile shattered instantly. More importantly, Gon hadn't even used full strength, at most 40 to 50%. And he hadn't even used Nen. To destroy the tile with pure physical force was already impressive. With some practice, he could boost the punch's power even more. Tianming nodded in satisfaction. This technique came from the Navy and was called the Navy Mountain Crushing Fist. He had expected Gon to pick it up easily. But that was the trick, he hadn't taught the full technique. Tianming walked over to Gon, who was still excitedly practicing punches, and patted him on the shoulder. "How about a deal? You surrender this match and let me pass, and I'll give you the complete version of this technique." Gon's face twisted. He clearly wanted to learn the full move, but couldn't bring himself to give up the match. Seeing the hesitation, Tianming pointed to the bracket board not far away and began analyzing. "See that list? Before the finals, everyone's divided into Group A and Group B. There are several people in both groups you absolutely can't beat. Like me, Hisoka, Killua, and Hanzo. If you fight them, you're just looking for trouble. The rules say no killing, sure, but they don't say anything about breaking limbs. If you're seriously injured or disabled, you won't be able to find your dad even if you get your license. He's a guy who runs and jumps around. You're not catching him on crutches." Gon didn't say anything, but from his expression, he seemed to agree with the logic. Tianming continued, "So the smart move is to go after the weak ones. That way, you pass without wasting energy. The easiest prey? Pakal and Badoro." Upon hearing their names, Pakal and Badoro's faces turned red with embarrassment. If they weren't already defeated, they might have tried to take Tianming down right there. Ignoring their glares, Tianming went on, "So don't fight me here just to prove a point. Admit defeat now, and take your shot at one of them. With your current strength, you should win easily." Some spectators were stunned by Tianming's blatant shamelessness, while others quietly agreed. Strong fighters could bulldoze through, but weaker ones needed strategy. Gon lowered his head in silence. After a long pause, he raised his head, eyes burning with determination. "I've decided. Even so, I'm not surrendering. And I don't plan to learn that technique either. I'm going to win and earn my hunter license." Tianming slapped his forehead. He looked helpless. Getting this stubborn kid to back down really was impossible. Since sweet talk didn't work, time to teach him a lesson. If the tiger doesn't roar, people really start to think it's Hello Kitty. His figure vanished in an instant. Gon flinched and stood on alert, preparing for an attack. But none came. Confused, he heard a familiar voice from the audience. "Hey! What do you think you're doing, you bastard? Let me go," Killua shouted. Everyone looked in the direction of the voice. Tianming had reappeared in the stands, grabbing Killua from behind, both of the boys' arms tightly bound. Killua was struggling and yelling furiously. Kurapika and Leorio sprang up, drawing their weapons. "Tianming, have you gone crazy? Your opponent is gone, why are you attacking Killua?" Chapter 23. Why did you attack Killua? This is a foul, let him go. Gon yelled at Tianming so loudly that Tianming's ears almost echoed. Tianming was about to speak when he felt a murderous aura suddenly rise behind him. He saw Illumi holding a round-headed needle in his hand. Although there was no expression on his face, his body was ready to attack, as if he would act immediately if Tianming dared to do anything. Facing Illumi's threat, Tianming glared and used his observation haki to shatter the opponent's murderous aura as if it were real. The conflict between the two sides was about to break out, and just when Illumi was about to attack, Hisoka suddenly came to him and whispered something. After hesitating for a few moments, Illumi retracted his murderous intent and stopped his action, but his eyes were still fixed on Tianming, and the round-headed needle in his hand was always ready. This little episode was seen by many people. Even Killua was very curious why Jitalagu suddenly wanted to save him. Did he know him? Gon's focus was not on this. He looked at Netero and shouted, "President Netero, Tianming broke the rules, are you not going to do anything about it?" As he yelled, everyone focused their attention on President Netero, waiting for his response. Netero stroked his beard and said in a tone that seemed to be eager to cause chaos, "I have already made the rules of the competition very clear before. There is no rule that prohibits attacking other candidates during the competition. Since there is no rule, It is not considered a violation for Tianming. Everyone opened their mouths wide when they heard this. Is it possible to play like this? Suddenly attacking an off-field player during a game would be a definite violation in other games, but nothing happened here. Is this old man too old and confused? With Netero's words, Tianming was finally able to let go and do what he wanted. He looked at Gon and threatened, "Quickly surrender. I know you are not afraid of death, and no matter how hard you fight, it will be useless, but the situation is different now. If you don't surrender, I will kill Killua immediately. You don't want a friend you just met to die in front of you." After saying that, he stared at Gon with a playful look. This kid, like Straw Hat Luffy, is a hot-blooded and stubborn type. He may not care about his own life or death, but he definitely cares about the life and death of his companions. Instead of threatening to kill them, it is better to threaten to kill their companions. However, at this moment, Gon suddenly laughed, and he pointed at Killua and smiled particularly brightly. "You can't kill Killua. Killua is also a candidate for this exam. If you kill him, it will also be a foul and you will be directly judged as losing." The scene fell into an eerie silence, and then there was a burst of giggling from the audience. Tianming's fingers kept shaking and his face flushed red. He was so focused on threatening the other party that he forgot about this. Gon continued, "And you won't kill Killua. I can feel that you should be a very kind person. What you said before was just to scare me." PFFT. Killua, who was held in Tianming's arms, couldn't help laughing. He thought that Gon was stupid enough, but he didn't expect that Tianming was even cuter than Gon. This guy really used all his talent points to improve his combat effectiveness, but he was still laughed at by Gon, who is so stubborn. His imbalance in subjects is too serious. Just as Gon and Killua were laughing, Tianming pinned the two naughty kids to the ground with one hand each, and then punched and kicked their delicate little faces. 3 minutes later, the two naughty kids' faces were swollen like pig heads. Tianming let out a breath and felt refreshed. It felt so good to beat people without any worries. He stretched out his right hand toward the referee and said, "I give up." The referee saw this and quickly announced the result of the match, with the final winner of Hunter Test 2 being Gon Freaks. Gon and Killua got up from the ground. They looked very angry at first, but then they laughed happily when they saw each other's pig heads. Looking at the laughing Gon, Tianming finally understood why so many people who were stronger than Gon ended up looking at him with admiration. This kid is indeed not just a simple hot-blooded idiot. Compared to Luffy and Uzumaki Naruto, who are simply hot-blooded, Gon gives people the feeling of a wild beast who has just awakened his intelligence. He has a wildness that has not been polluted by human society. This animality makes him often make decisions that ordinary people can't think of. Since Tianming admitted defeat in this game, the next game will still be played by Tianming. Gon and Killua are talking and laughing as they prepare to leave. At this moment, Tianming called Gon. Gon turned around in confusion and heard Tianming ask, "If I were not a human but a beast, would you still refuse to admit defeat like before?" Gon was stunned by Tianming's question. He had never thought about this question before. So he came to the audience seats with Tianming's question, and Tianming also met his new opponent, Bakura. In the center of the training ground, Tianming was still standing in the same position as before, but this time the enemy was replaced by Bakura. Looking at the listless Tianming, Bakura clenched his fists and his confidence increased. Gon's victory gave him great confidence. Although Zhao Tianming was very powerful, he didn't seem to have much desire to fight. When facing Gon before, the first thing he did was not to fight with him, but to negotiate with the other party what conditions he would have to surrender. It can be seen that he is a person who does not like to use violence. I can completely replicate Gon's method. As long as I refuse to surrender, I can get the final victory. If that doesn't work, I can also learn that kind of powerful physical skill from the opponent. Either way, I won't lose out. With the referee's order, the game officially started. Bakura was still thinking about what conditions he should put forward, but when he looked up suddenly, he found that Tianming had disappeared in front of him. "Hey! Where is this guy?" Boom! Tianming appeared in front of Bakuer like a ghost and punched him in the abdomen. Bakuer was beaten so badly that he lay on the ground with his body bent like a shrimp. His body kept shaking and he vomited acid from his mouth. The severe pain made his brain shut down and he also had a lot of doubts in his mind. How come this is different from what he expected? Shouldn't this guy put forward conditions first? Why did he just attack right away? Tianming used a lot of force in this punch, keeping the force to a level that hurts the opponent but does not cause internal injuries. Otherwise, an ordinary punch from him could have killed Bakuer directly. After a few more punches, Bakuer was almost beaten to the point of rolling his eyes. He lay on the ground and raised his right hand to show that he wanted to surrender. Tianming nodded with satisfaction upon seeing this. Everything was just as he expected. In this kind of competition, one should pick on the weak ones. It was really satisfying to pick on the weak one like Bakuer. Bakuer, who was lying on the ground, almost had his teeth broken. When dealing with Gon, Tianming didn't fight back if he could and even taught him the technique of how to use his fists. But when it came to him, he just punched him in the stomach without saying a word. This is too much of a double standard. Fortunately, Tianming didn't know what he was thinking, otherwise he would definitely show a look of disgust. With your brain being played with by someone, I want to deal with you the same way I dealt with Gon. Chapter 24. Compared to the match between Tianming and Gon, the following battles were much simpler. Hisoka vs Spadoro. Hisoka won without a doubt. Hanzo vs Leorio. Although the strength gap between the two wasn't as large as the previous match, Hanzo still defeated Leorio with overwhelming force. But even after being knocked down, Leorio refused to admit defeat. He lay on the ground, pointing at Hanzo and cursing loudly. Hanzo, a veteran troublemaker from Zaun, immediately fired back. The two of them bickered in the middle of the arena, much to everyone's astonishment. In the end, Hanzo got the upper hand. He threatened to cut off one of Leorio's fingers if he didn't surrender. If Leorio still refused, he'd cut off another one. Leorio's dream was to become a doctor. Losing his fingers would mean giving up on the dream forever. In the end, he gritted his teeth and surrendered. Hanzo was declared the winner. According to the rules, the next match should have been between the two losers, Spadoro and Leorio. However, both were seriously injured. They reached an agreement to postpone their match and let others go first while they recovered. With their fight postponed, the next match was Killua vs Bakuer. The previous battle with Tianming had left Bakuer with some minor injuries. However, they were all superficial and didn't affect his combat ability, so he didn't request a delay like Leorio and the others. Killua, on the other hand, frowned. Bakuer looked rather delicate and had just been injured. Winning against him wouldn't feel fair, so Killua announced to the referee that he would forfeit the match. Everyone was surprised by Killua's decision, everyone except Tianming, who smirked. "Kid, showing off like that will come back to bite you. Don't cry when it does." Killua, who had just forfeited, advanced to the next round. This time, his opponent was Illumi, who had been hiding behind the alias Jitaraker. This time, Killua didn't act cool, he got serious. He had sensed from the start that this Jitaraker was incredibly powerful, but since he'd stayed low profile, he hadn't drawn attention. More than that, something about this person felt strangely familiar, and Killua wanted to find out who he really was. When both sides were ready, the referee raised his hand and then dropped it. "Begin." Killua was about to launch into action when a chillingly familiar voice called out from Jitaraker. "Killua. So you really didn't recognize me?" Even if Killua turned to ash, he would still recognize that voice. It was his older brother, Illumi. But how could that be possible? Why did this man sound exactly like Illumi? As Killua stared, horrified, Illumi calmly pulled out the round-headed needles from his face, revealing his true identity. He had long, flowing black hair that draped over his shoulders, fair skin, delicate features, and large, blankly staring eyes. He looked harmless and handsome, devoid of the aura one would expect from a top assassin. But even with the gentle appearance, Killua broke into a cold sweat, his fingers trembling. He stammered, "Be big brother." Gon and the others were shocked by Killua's reaction and looked at Illumi in confusion. Killua had called this guy big brother. Were they really siblings? They didn't look alike at all. And if they were brothers, why was Killua so afraid? Weren't brothers supposed to get along? What followed wasn't a battle but a conversation, although it was mostly Illumi talking. Killua kept his head down, silent, like a child being scolded for misbehaving. Through their exchange, everyone learned the truth: Killua had indeed done something wrong. Before he ran away from home, he had attacked his mother and second brother. One would think his family would be furious. But Illumi calmly said, "Mother was proud." She said, as expected of Killua, "You are the pride of our family." Leorio, who was recovering in a makeshift bed, nearly fell out from shock. What kind of messed up family is that? They're proud even when they get beat up? This kind of mental illness couldn't be cured without spending hundreds of millions in Jenny. Tianming stroked his chin thoughtfully. Now that he thought about it, the Zoldyck family really was bizarre. Killua had 5 brothers, yet he was the only one with white hair. The other 4 all had black hair, making him the odd one out. If that were all, it wouldn't be so strange. But both Silva Zoldyck, Killua's father, and Zeno Zoldyck, his grandfather, also had white hair. Did that mean only one child in each generation inherited the white hair? That raised another question. Killua wasn't the oldest or youngest sibling, he was the third born. If white hair followed bloodline inheritance, then the eldest sibling, Illumi, should have had it. But he didn't. Killua did. Which meant the white hair appeared randomly, and if Kikyo Zoldyck had stopped having children after Illumi, the white-haired bloodline might have ended entirely. But wait. That led to another thought. If this was truly a family trait passed through generations, then Silva and even Zeno should have had siblings too. Surely they weren't the only children in their generations? So where were those siblings now? They never appeared in the series, yet they must have had comparable strength. With so many powerhouses in one family, the Zoldks should have been unstoppable. So where did all those siblings go? Could it be that Silva and Zeno were both only children? Or were the siblings who didn't inherit the white hair trait? Tianming shook his head, chasing away those grim thoughts. No, no. This was a wholesome anime about family, friendship, and dreams. There's no way it would feature such a dark and brutal backstory. He was definitely overthinking it. Just as he was lost in thought, Killua forfeited the match. Tianming wasn't surprised. Even he might struggle to defeat Illumi, so Killua didn't stand a chance. Still, something was off about Killua. After forfeiting, he didn't return to the audience like the others. Instead, he lingered at the edge of the arena. Tianming activated his observation haki. He sensed that Killua was in a semi-dormant state, and detected a faint presence of nen on Killua's forehead. Illumi had already implanted a nen needle to manipulate him. Badoro and Leorio noticed that something was off, but since the referee didn't say anything, they kept their distance and prepared for their match. Just as the two of them were about to fight, Killua suddenly appeared behind Badoro and drove his sharpened fingers toward the man's heart. Chapter 25. Tianming grabbed Killua's hand, his thick palm clamping down like iron. Only then did everyone realize what had happened. Boudreaux retreated in panic. He hadn't expected this powerful kid to suddenly attack him. At the same time, he was immensely grateful to Tianming. If not for him, he'd probably be dead. But Killua didn't just sit there and accept defeat. His body suddenly stretched into a straight line with his right arm, and with a sudden death roll, he pulled his hand free from Tianming's grip. Once free, he immediately lunged at Boudreaux again. But this time, Tianming didn't give him the chance to escape. With a swift kick to Killua's calf, he grabbed the boy's head from behind and ran his fingers along the crown of his head. Just as his index finger reached Killua's forehead, he touched a hard object, One of Illumi's signature needles? Without hesitation, Tianming pinched it and pulled. The needle slid out of Killua forehead, and his awareness instantly snapped back. Startled, he jumped back as if shocked by electricity, putting distance between himself and Tianming. "What's going on? Why did you attack me again?" Killua asked, still on alert. His memory had frozen at the moment of confrontation with his brother. But in the blink of an eye, his brother had vanished, and now Tianming was here instead. What happened? Gon rushed over and let out a long sigh of relief when he saw Killua had returned to normal. He quickly explained everything. Once Killua understood he'd been controlled, he turned toward Illumi, gritting his teeth. Even though he knew Illumi wouldn't actually hurt him, he was furious at his brother's manipulative tactics. What if he'd attacked Gon while under control? Illumi, still being watched by everyone, didn't bother denying anything. He admitted calmly, "It was me. But I only did it to move things along. I wanted the game to end quickly." Netero, who had been enjoying the chaos, stroked his beard and chuckled. Killing another candidate results in disqualification. But since Boudreaux's alive, Jitaligu still passes. The competition continues. From then on, everyone watched Illumi more carefully. With that many eyes on him, there was little he could do. 3 hours later, all the remaining matches concluded. Illumi and Tianming didn't make any further moves, which was a huge relief for the others. The result surprised many. The person eliminated in the final round of the Hunter exam was none other than Killua. By procedure, Boudreaux and Leorio were meant to face off. But Leorio, a civilian with limited combat experience, was no match for Boudreaux, who had trained in martial arts for years. Taking a page from Hanzo's playbook, Boudreaux also threatened to cut off Leorio's fingers. In the end, Leorio admitted defeat, and the final match came down to him versus Killua. Leorio had planned to surrender. He knew he couldn't beat Killua and had accepted he'd try again next year. But to everyone's shock, Killua surrendered first. He hadn't taken the exam seriously from the beginning. Compared to his own goals, Leorio clearly needed the license more. Without hesitation, Killua forfeited and let Leorio pass. Tianming was dumbfounded. Killua was eliminated before he time-traveled, and even after all this effort, he still got eliminated again? Did he go through all that for nothing? As the exam ended, the Hunter Association issued licenses to the successful candidates, a symbol of their status. Tianming held his license and examined it carefully. It looked like a thick, heavy bank card, but with a satisfying feel in the hand. Though the exam had concluded, the association didn't immediately disband everyone. They hosted a small celebratory banquet aboard the ship to reward the new hunters. Tianming remained on the ship for 3 more days. He only disembarked on the afternoon of the 3rd day, mostly because he'd stayed up gaming the night before. By the time he stepped onto the dock of Golmud City, most of the other candidates had already left. He yawned and dragged himself down the gangway, only to find someone waiting for him. "Why are you still here?" he asked lazily. "I came specifically to wait for you to disembark," replied Boudreaux, standing straight with a serious expression. He bowed deeply, 90 degrees. "Thank you for saving my life. I'll never forget your kindness." Tianming waved a hand. "It was nothing. You didn't stay just to say thanks, did you?" Boudreaux stood up straight and handed him a letter. "Kurapika left this before he left. He asked me to make sure to reach you." Tianming opened it. It was a farewell letter. Kurapika, Gon, Killua, and Leorio had all signed it. It turned out that Killua, unwilling to return home with Illumi, had escaped with Gon and the others by stealing an emergency raft before the ship docked. The letter also listed Kurapika and Leorio's phone numbers, in case Tianming ever needed help. He pulled out his phone, a brick-like button model, since the Hunter x Hunter world wasn't exactly cutting edge, and typed the numbers into the contacts list. Then, using armament hockey, he crumbled the letter into dust. "Give me your number too," Tianming said. "So I can reach you if anything comes up." Boudreaux gave it to him without hesitation. With that, the hunter exam was truly over. Before they parted ways, Boudreaux brought up one last thing. During their match, Hisako had revealed his nen ability to him and told him to come to the Sky Arena if he wanted to learn. He was hesitant. Hisako was unpredictable, there was no telling if he was being sincere or just toying with him. Tianming advised him not to go. "You already passed the hunter exam," he said. "Someone from the association will teach you nen. No need to gamble your life at the Sky Arena."